across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
My thanks to the brilliant Julia Hartley-Brewer. Coming up to 3 minutes past 1. Mark Dolan in for Ian Collins all of this week. And what a week to be on air. Breaking this afternoon, the Prime Minister fights for his political life as he admits that he misled Parliament. Well, he'll be facing a House of Commons Select Committee, in relation to which he'll be quizzed about how much he knew and when in regard to Peter Mandelson's failure to pass security vetting. Now, we'll bring you live coverage of the PM live from the Commons as he takes his seat. We're expecting him at around 3:30. Before then and after, we're going to be hearing from the biggest names in politics and journalism. But most importantly this afternoon, I want to hear from you, and I've got a simple question. Is Keir Starmer a liar? My phone number is 0344 499 1000. Faith is taking your calls. You can hear the show, of course, all afternoon on DAB+, in-app and online. You can also watch us, and you can see Dolan's Dispatch and my brilliant guests and the Prime Minister live from Westminster, all on YouTube. If you want to watch the show, head to YouTube, search Talk and hit the live button, and we magically appear, courtesy of Jana, who is directing our TV output today. So much to get through. Finlay is the boss and James is pressing the buttons, and I'm pressing your buttons because I want to know whether you believe Starmer. Is the Prime Minister a liar? It's a big word. Does he cross that threshold? 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222, or leave us a voice note. We know you're busy this afternoon. Lots going on a Monday. So much to get through. The Prime Minister live at 3:30. Is he a liar? As the saying goes, let's talk. And we kick off with Dolan's Dispatch. I smell a rat. Keir Starmer is a catastrophically bad politician and a dreadful Prime Minister. But he's not stupid, and he's a lawyer. He understands process, liability and distance. And that's why this whole Mandelson affair stinks. Because my suspicion is that Starmer and his inner circle wanted Peter Mandelson in Washington so badly that they created a system in which the appointment could be forced through whilst the boss remained insulated from the dirty work. Now, that to me is at the heart of it. Starmer wanted Mandelson, but chose not to have a paper trail or a bloody dagger that would implicate him. Now, we're told Starmer's defence is simple. I didn't know, no one told me, but that doesn't stack up. Peter Mandelson was controversial not just because of his well-known association with Jeffrey Epstein, but because of foreign links, which posed a security risk. This was not obscure gossip whispered in a corridor. It was in the public domain, in newspapers, in briefing papers, and crucially, in the Cabinet Office. And due diligence material reportedly sent to the Prime Minister before the appointment. Starmer had seen plenty of paperwork about Mandelson that was damning, that was a red flag, that was problematic, long before the security vetting began. For example, in 2013, Peter Mandelson joined the board of Sistema as a non-executive director. Now, Sistema was the majority shareholder in RTI Systems. Who are they? Wait for it. A major Russian defense contractor involved in products including drones and radar systems. This is who Mandelson was doing business with in 2013. He was doing business with the Russians. He was paid £200,000 a year and given a shareholding as well, and placed on the audit committee. He was all in with the Russians in 2013. And after Russia invaded Crimea in 2014, he was told to get rid of his interests. He didn't. He stayed until 2020, even writing a letter in 2017 to Vladimir Putin on Sistema's behalf over a legal issue. So let's drop the pretense that this was some minor oversight and that the Prime Minister knew nothing. One security source has described Sistema as being riddled with Russian intelligence officers, with Mandelson, and I quote, swimming in a sea of Russian spies. And this is the guy that Starmer thought would be the perfect representative of the United Kingdom in America. So all of this is extraordinary. Serious foreign links. Also concerns, reportedly including briefing papers over lobbying connected to China. That's right, we got the Russians and then we got the Chinese. According to reports, Mandelson had already been formally warned by British and EU intelligence officials about Russian-linked businesses, but they were worried about China too. So ask yourself this, folks, at 1:08 in the afternoon. Why would this guy, Sir Ollie Robbins, who has paid with his job, a lifelong civil servant, a man of rules, process and caution, the ultimate pen pusher, an administrative nerd, a man who loves a spreadsheet, why would this anonymous figure of Ollie Robbins suddenly decide to bury crucial information from the Prime Minister just to get Mandelson into the job? What possible incentive would he have to torch his own reputation for Peter Mandelson? It makes no sense. I smell a rat. The much more plausible explanation is that this outcome was priced in from the start. Foreign Office officials reportedly warned the Foreign Secretary that this guy was a problem. Jonathan Powell, there are so many people that flagged this up, yet Starmer pressed on anyway, appointing this guy to one of the most sensitive diplomatic posts in the British state. One involving access not just to British intelligence, but to intelligence shared by the Americans and our allies. So it doesn't wash, and I do smell a rat. The claim that Starmer was blindsided is unsustainable. He was warned. He had the paperwork. He knew the risks. He appointed Mandelson anyway, which takes me to the political editor of the independent newspaper, David Maddox, a very good friend of mine that I've known for years, and a man who ran the story that Mandelson had failed security vetting on the 12th of September of last year. So it's front page news, but Starmer will have you believe that it was only on Tuesday he found out it was on the front page of a national newspaper. But old Starmer, rabbit in the headlights that he is, did not know about this. Plus, David Maddox messaged Number 10 about this story on WhatsApp and has screenshotted that conversation for public view. So are you asking us to believe that the Number 10 media operation knew about this story, but it didn't reach Morgan McSweeney, the Chief of Staff, or the boss, the Prime Minister? Not only was it front page news, it was just the talking point of Westminster for a week. At the very least, seeing that headline, figures at Number 10 would surely have reached out to the Foreign Office to say, hey, what's going on? Is that story true? Has Mandelson failed vetting? Now, the man whose nickname was the Prince of Darkness, which you might think would be a red flag in the first place, has managed to somehow cause enormous damage to this government and potentially will end the career of the Prime Minister. But it was the Prime Minister who appears to have ridden roughshod over the rules to get his man. Now, if Ollie Robbins lied and said, yes, Mandelson passed vetting, then Starmer is home and hosed. If Ollie Robbins lied, Starmer walks free. But the thing about Ollie Robbins is that as a civil servant, he may yield to political pressure because it's his job to fulfil the wishes of the elected government. But his ultimate master will be the truth and process and procedure and the rules. That's the point. He's got to do the right thing, something that cannot be said of our serially dishonest, slippery, duplicitous and shifty Prime Minister. Folks, I smell a rat. And it's just possible that this week that rat will be forced to leap from a sinking ship. Your reaction, 03444991000. Is Sir Keir Starmer a liar? Oscar Reddrop is a former Number 10 advisor. Oscar, great to have you on the show.
Good afternoon.
We have two problems. None of this adds up, Oscar, and there is no well of goodwill towards the Prime Minister, and he doesn't enjoy much credibility.
No, and look, everyone has obviously been talking about this in Westminster, probably to lesser and greater degrees across the country. But listening to you there, the thing that I think is that you have really hit the nail on the head with, I think, that is slightly underpriced, is distance. I think Keir Starmer knows the power of distance. And I think at all times here, he has absolutely tried to maintain that level of distance from this situation. But over the weeks, over the days, and almost hours at this point, those walls are closing in. And you're right. For me, in many ways, you can get into the civil service kind of back and forth and process, and that's the other thing here. It's going to be hysterical in many ways, and just quite painful watching a man who has consistently tied his whole identity, not just over the Mandelson fiasco, but his entire identity as prime minister over process, who is now going to turn around, I imagine, in a couple of hours' time, and throw process under the bus and say, oh, well, it didn't work, and it's so that doesn't make sense on its own terms. But the David Maddox article, and I know David too, he is a very objective, proper serious journalist.
Yeah.
Okay, and that I've worked in that building, and there are similarities in many ways between what Boris was going through when I was there. In terms of, did he or didn't he mislead Parliament, and what's happening now. And there is no way that front page story did not filter to the Prime Minister. There is no way, unless his desire for distance, and this is the other question here, his desire for distance means burying his head so deep in the sand, he is not fit to be Prime Minister. So it's either one or the other. And that WhatsApp exchange that you just put on the screen is really, really interesting, because there is no denial there from Tim Allen. In terms of he could have said, well, Prime Minister absolutely not aware of this, blah 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 blah. Like it honestly beggars belief at this point. No denial. And when was that? That was September. So we have a Prime Minister now who is forced into a position to either throwing his hands in the air and saying, I lied, or throw his hands in the air and say, I am just so incompetent that I have no idea at the highest levels with the highest stakes stuff here. This isn't small fry stuff. I have no idea what's going on in my office or not even my government. I have no idea what's going in my own office. And either of those, in a normal world, result in only one outcome, which is he's got to go.
Most definitely. Whenever there's a political scandal, I look at two things. I follow the money and I follow the political gain. And it strikes me that Ollie Robbins, as a pen-pushing administrator, had no skin in the game here with this appointment, had nothing to gain, no incentive to flout the rules to give Mandelson this job.
No, it doesn't make sense. And look, we'll see. And I think, again, in your opening gambit, you're right to say that if Ollie Robbins throws his hands in the air and says, oh, I absolutely, I acted alone. I don't know what came over me. I was having a lazy day and I thought, yeah, I'll just wave this through. Unless that happens, this is a guy who's worked for 4 prime ministers, I think it is, going back to David Cameron. This is a serious civil servant.
They live for procedure. It defines them.
Absolutely. It would make absolutely no sense unless there was some really, really heavy political pressure that, once again, Keir Starmer may want to say, well, I didn't know about that political pressure because I care about distance. And this thing with Starmer, and again, you were right to say, he's not an idiot. I remember, what was it called? Beergate at the time,
yeah,
or whatever it was.
Sir Beer Starmer, Sir Beer Cormer.
All that stuff. Starmer is everyone used to say it about Boris, Teflon Boris this, Teflon Boris that.
No.
To an extent that was true. But Starmer is, in many ways, he's a bit like one of those old Nokia phones that you can't smash. He understands, he's slippery. He understands
because he
distance.
had a beer during the pandemic, but it was a meeting, and I believe he was standing up, which helps or something.
I mean, we could do a whole segment on that, and we won't go back to 2020, whenever it was. But he understands the art of survival. But also, if you listen to the left of his party way back when, and most of these people have probably gravitated to the Greens, but when he stood for selection, they would say, in terms of the manifesto, if you like, that he ran to be leader of the Labour Party, he barefaced lied. So this is the other thing. This is a man who people would say is capable of lying. And this is definitely a man who has a track record of creating distance. And that's what, and I'm not just blowing up your own trumpet here, but that is what people, I think, haven't quite narrowed in on. That is an art form and a skill, but it gets to a point where being distant from all these major decisions, and he does it not just on the Mandelson stuff, he does it on a whole host of things. It becomes, you are not cut out for this job, mate. And actually, we need a prime minister during these very dark and challenging times that doesn't want distance, that wants to get his hands, absolutely on the issues of the day and drag this country forward. So it's either cowardice, which often it feels like the way with Starmer at the moment, like a moral cowardice almost, or just complete incompetence.
Well, I don't know why we needed security vetting in the first place. I can't believe, Oscar, that Mandelson got that far. His nickname was the Prince of Darkness, which I would humbly suggest is something of a red flag. He left the cabinet twice in disgrace, and certainly the allegations against him on the first occasion were upheld. Then you've got the issue of him taking 200 grand a year for over a decade from a company that makes military drones for the Russians. Then there are the links to his lobbying firm and the Chinese communist state. It shouldn't have even got to the point of vetting. Yeah. And this has all happened on the watch of the Prime Minister, whose last job was as Director of Public Prosecutions, a man who existed to interrogate the facts.
Well, here's the other thing to throw into the mix here with Starmer, which is slightly... it's like a fly in the ointment almost. In that, I don't think Keir Starmer passionately cared about hiring Peter Mandelson. I don't think Keir Starmer passionately cares about many political decisions, but I think people around him certainly did. And again, whether that's head in the sand or strategic distance, whichever one it is, Keir Starmer is far removed from a lot of those decisions. And so, I can almost see him, okay, so it's going to be Peter, is it? Okay, oh, well, that does sound a bit, okay, all right, well, if you say so, okay, let's go for it. And part of when you add in all these elements of Keir Starmer as a person and a prime minister, it does make him very hard to pin down, because he's never definitive. He's very rarely passionate about decisions and certain strategic moves. I mean, we're hearing today that we're going to see the most angry Keir Starmer we've ever seen. If any of you have seen that clip of him punching a punch bag at a boxing gym, I wouldn't expect much on that front. But again, just very, very quickly on the politics of it. Again, the thing in that old Nokia phone thing that I think is saving him a little bit here. Who is going to take him on? I mean, again, the process is different with Boris. Tories love getting rid of leaders. You just chuck letters in, and then it's up for grabs. Then you hear stories of new Tory leaders coming in, and letters go in on the first day of their reign just because certain MPs don't like them. The Labour Party is very, very different, and we've got Angela Rayner, who's still got her tax stuff, and we've got Wes Streeting, who also, I don't think we've probably heard the full extent, also has links and a relationship with Mandelson that is awkward for him, and was awkward for him at the time when it blew up a couple months ago. And so Starmer, by almost the paralysis of no viable option at the moment, that also helps Starmer stay in place for the time being.
The Prime Minister is expected in the House of Commons at a select committee in 2 hours' time at 3:30. We'll bring you live coverage of that, but more reaction, more analysis. I'm delighted to say that former number 10 advisor Oscar Reddrop is going to stay with us. My question to you this afternoon is a simple one. Is Sir Keir Starmer a liar?
any minister, whether it's the most important one, the Prime Minister, lying to the House of Commons is a capital offence and would have to go.
The week before the attack, he was off to try and do a different attack, and he was eventually stopped by his dad. So the second time it happened, where they also knew he ordered a cab and took out a knife from the house, they never once called the police.
First rule of politics, don't slam the Pope. Don't have a go at the Pope, because you lose the Catholic vote at a stroke. I'm not a big fan of Pope Leo. I like his brother.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Is Sir Keir Starmer a liar? Well, such a big response online. Sean in Poole says, Mark, is Keir Starmer a liar? Is the Pope a Catholic? Andrew says, Mark, Keir Starmer lied himself into power. He's the biggest liar, hands down. Not only time for him to go, but also time for his P45. On the Prime Minister, ask no questions, get told no lies, says an anonymous texter. It is plausible deniability. This from Amanda. Good afternoon, Amanda. Thank you for watching the show. Amanda says, Mark, while I, of course, realise these are serious times, I can't help but wonder if anyone else has spotted the similarity between Mandelson's Starmer and Morecambe and Wise. Starmer minus the glasses. Yeah, they are a comedy double act, but this time we're not laughing. Chris in Hornchurch, has anyone explained why Peter Mandelson was so important for the job? Who or what was in it? Has anyone asked who behind the scenes told Ollie Robbins to wave it through? Ollie Robbins said he was told to wave it through. This from an unnamed, who's actually chosen to be anonymous. Let's call him Robert, right? Robert has said, Mark, your brilliant guest, Oscar Reddrop, knows as well as I do that every morning there is a press briefing in the cabinet room with 5 or 6 members of the press office, some from policy and their relevant people from the private office. To think this wasn't discussed is impossible and ridiculous. And last for now, Steve says, Mark, is Starmer a liar? Well, here are some examples. He said he would smash the gangs. He wouldn't raise taxes. He wouldn't attempt to take us back into Europe. He wouldn't cut pensioners' winter fuel payments. Very good point, Steve. He also didn't mention digital ID or the Chagos Islands giveaway. Oscar, there is a big sort of legalistic problem here facing the Prime Minister, but an even bigger political one.
For sure. And I think it was that anonymous caller who's absolutely spot on. You know, this independent story from David Maddox wasn't, page 8. It was the front page of the Independent. And there is just and that was back in September. And there is no way that didn't filter through to the Prime Minister. Unless quite literally, and here's the other thing, that at this point, it sounds silly, it sounds so ridiculous, but you almost can't rule out that Keir Starmer in person doesn't say to some of the people around him, look, anything Mandelson comes up, I don't want to know. Okay, so I don't want it included in my press briefing. I don't want to know. That is possible. I mean, that would be really, in terms of, creating that distance and head in the sand stuff that I think he would hope maybe one day he would need to bank on. That would be taking it to such an extreme. But at this point, cannot rule it out. And look, and I'm not trying to make this interview boring, but this is the other thing that's going on right now, which for your viewers and listeners is the most damaging thing ultimately, is that, and again, it's said with no judgment, I worked at Number 10 at a time where it was like this, but when it's the tailspin, when it's just Number 10 trying to get through the day and survive and justify its own, lurching from a crisis to crisis, justifying its own existence, guess what? Cost of living, no one's looking or working on that. Immigration, no one's looking at working on that. Healthcare, no one's, all the big issues that are actually important to us, Number 10 are spending no time on whatsoever. And that is where it becomes not just a bit of fun Westminster stuff, but that's where people's real lives are impacted by stuff like this. It's not sometimes it's not the crisis itself, because and I get there are security concerns and what it says about having peace. I get all that. That is important. It's sometimes not the crisis itself, it's what it's distracting from that is actually impacting people's lives.
I completely agree with you, Oscar, and I'm really glad that you've pointed out the cost of living and the parlous state of the economy, open borders, the fact that we're not drilling for oil and gas on our own shores during an energy crisis. None of it makes sense. It's really, really hurting my viewers and listeners. And, let's talk about domestic politics, because we've got a very unwelcome headline in today's Telegraph. Unemployment to top 2 million for the first time in more than a decade. This was a problem, unemployment, that we had effectively neutralised, wasn't it? And it's returned. And it's clearly because of this government's economic policies. If you burden businesses with taxation, the NICS tax rate, red tape, of course, and then the increase in the minimum wage, go figure, you're going to get unemployment.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the more predictable signs of a Labour government and a very, very, in some ways, a very traditional Labour government and policy, in that if you make it harder to employ people, if you absolutely restrict the ambitions of small, medium-sized businesses, this is what will happen. They said no tax rise on working people, but they literally put an effective tax on the absolute heartbeat of our country who employ people. And then the other side,
if you tax companies, you are taxing workers. The end.
The end. And, and that kind of way of Labour thinking obviously extended. The other end of this is the welfare bill that already, this was months ago. This is a very new government that should have all the political capital in the world. Didn't have the bottle, the stomach, the political capital to get through. Angela Rayner, funnily enough, kind of won her battle on that over number 10 and number 11. And so when you come at those two sides, you make it very costly for businesses to employ people, and you make and you're not willing to take on the welfare bill. This is absolutely what you get, and it is. We honestly, and I know the Tories messed a lot of stuff up, but you take for granted how damaging high levels of unemployment are for a country. It can really sink a nation, and I'm worried, and I'm scared that we're not even hitting the top marker here, as in this number is going to go up and up and up.
Well, I completely agree. And actually, let's look back at the record of the Conservatives. There's the small matter of the COVID pandemic, in which we had 3 national lockdowns. The leader of the opposition at the time, and now Prime Minister Starmer, wanted more. We had the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which obviously spiked energy prices and created inflation. I think it's important to have those two things in context when you look at the Tories in power. And Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister, July 2024, at the time of the election, inflation was at 2% and we had the highest growth in the G7, and unemployment was at a trivial rate. Well, now it's going to hit 2 million. You worked with Boris Johnson, former number 10 advisor. Do you think that he is entitled to feel aggrieved at this stage, given the circumstances in which he left office?
Look, I actually get why there was something so, with Partygate, there was something so viscerally kind of awful about it. Like, I really, really get that. But Boris, it's funny, Keir Starmer often, and we had to watch it continuously, kind of the moralising and the whiter than white.
The pearl clutching.
Oh, absolutely, from Keir, which is another thing, by the way, that makes this just completely kind of, for me anyway, completely absurdly painful and crazy to watch. But Boris didn't. I'm trying to give you a really honest answer here. Keir Starmer said that Boris was someone who threw people under the bus. To a degree in politics at that level, you always have to, there is a bit of that in politics. It's not a nice business. It's not a nice place. It's not a nice business.
Sure.
But the extent to which Keir Starmer has chucked people under the bus, when I compared to Boris, there's no comparison. You could argue Boris was actually probably carried the can for things that maybe he shouldn't have always carried the can for.
Yeah.
If anything, Keir Starmer has sacked and, human shielded, countless people since he's been Prime Minister, not even on the Mandelson issue, just across a whole host of issues, in number 10, since he took power. And that is that moral cowardice I talk about. And I think, ironically enough now, we're reaching the point where he's kind of run out of people to throw under that
Well,
bus.
I totally agree. And I think with the Boris story, well, it was priced in that Boris was something of a rogue, a charismatic rough diamond. I think you could maybe say the same thing for Nigel Farage. You could definitely say it about Donald Trump, and with that comes some protection. When you don't have protection is when you present yourself as holier than thou, a grown-up in the room like Starmer, and we're discovering he's the complete opposite. Oscar, before I let you go, I've only got a couple of seconds. He's clearly going to, deploy legalese this afternoon at this select committee, and he will likely defend himself vociferously, and there will be more clutching of pearls. But what about tomorrow, Ollie Robbins? What's the worst case scenario for the PM? Because talking about being thrown under the bus, surely Ollie Robbins holds the fate of the Prime Minister in his own hands.
He does. And if Ollie Robbins says, well, it very much was flagged, or I was put under considerable political pressure that I felt I could not ignore, I think those two things are complete, it should be game over anyway, to be frank, but that would be incredibly hard to get back from the Prime Minister. Just very, very lastly, Mark, the other thing that for your viewers, if they haven't already noticed, they probably have, because they're pretty on the ball, I imagine. The other thing we'll see probably today from Starmer, and it's already been happening, is he's going to talk about Iran. He's going to talk about the world stage and how, we need stability in this country, and that what a good job he's been doing on that. And we can't, do change now, and blah, 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 blah. Load of rubbish.
Well said. What a delight to have you on the programme on this important day, Oscar. Please join me again in the very near future. Oscar Reddrop is a former number 10 advisor to Boris Johnson, no less. Well, let's have a look. I've actually got a couple of messages in relation to Boris. And this is from, let's have a look. Oh, yes, Margaret. Good afternoon, Mark. Not just a liar, Starmer, but a hypocrite. He had a go at Boris Johnson about the Partygate scandal. He said the buck stops at the PM. Well, slippery Starmer, we see you. The country is waiting for you to resign. Is Starmer a liar? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk. Let's take a voice note. Is Keir Starmer a liar?
Keir Starmer is a liar, in my opinion. And he's, not only is he a liar, but he's a snake. He's a wolf in sheep's clothing. I think he's governing against the interests of the native British people of these islands. He will not stop the illegal and legal immigration, which is destroying our country. He's gone after our pensioners. He's gone after our farmers. He's ruined the economy. He is the worst prime minister in living memory. They've all got to go. I want a general election. I'm voting reform.
Daniel, thank you for an excellent voice note. Jill Rutter is a senior fellow at the Institute for Government. Jill, thank you so much for joining us on Talk.
Hi, Mark.
Brilliant to have you on the programme. How much trouble is the Prime Minister in?
I think he's in quite a lot of trouble. And the question is whether he's in loads more trouble than he was, because he already had the Mandelson thing hanging over him, and he knows that he's facing what I could euphemistically term very difficult local elections. And we know that there are quite a lot of people in the Labour Party who are deciding whether he really is the Prime Minister that they want to continue with and should lead them into the next election. So I think, recent events have worsened things a bit on that front. I think what they really have done, though, is dramatically worsen his relations with the civil service. And I don't think that's going to make governing any easier for him.
Will Sir Ollie Robbins spare the Prime Minister tomorrow in the House of Commons?
It's quite interesting. I was listening to what you were saying to Oscar. I think he might help the Prime Minister by making clear that he didn't think he was able to share information about the vetting with the Prime Minister. One of the things that, we've seen lots of people say, and your theme is the Prime Minister a liar? If Ollie Robbins tomorrow says, no, I had this information and I didn't share it with the Prime Minister, I thought it was wrong to share it with the Prime Minister for these reasons, that's why I didn't do it, then in a sense that's helpful for the Prime Minister, because saying I didn't, no one number 10 knew anything of the sort of what happened as a result of the UK security vetting. I didn't think it was appropriate to tell them. That at one level would be helpful to the Prime Minister, but the Prime Minister, I think at another level, we get the questions, why did he make this initial appointment in the first place? That doesn't go away. He had all those things flagged. We now know that the former Cabinet Secretary, Simon Case, said to the Prime Minister, do not make the announcement before you've got the result of the proper vetting.
Yes.
Going through the deep dive vetting, which is the thing that we're all talking about. He chose to ignore that. I think Ollie Robbins may very well have assumed that his job was to find a way to make this appointment happen for the Prime Minister, and actually possibly thought he did a good job for the Prime Minister by getting a report with some question marks about Peter Mandelson and finding a way that the Foreign Office could satisfy themselves that Mandelson could do the job for the political skills he was deemed to bring without those interests getting too far in the way. So I think Ollie Robbins clearly feels very hard done by. So I think in that sense, it's not going to be good news for the Prime Minister tomorrow.
Most definitely. And in the last 24 hours, Jill, the number 10 operation have definitely been quite critical of Ollie Robbins. He's been cast as the bad guy here, that he did not tell the Prime Minister this important piece of information. But it's hard to imagine that Ollie Robbins, a lifelong civil servant who reached the top of his profession, Jill, should ride roughshod over the rules, over serious national security concerns, and act unilaterally to make sure Mandelson gets the job, because I just don't see why it would be in his own interests to do that.
Well, I think he had a thing where the Prime Minister, clearly in the light of red flags that had already been raised early in the process, had decided Mandelson was a risk worth taking. Question, did the security vetting flag things that weren't known before? Were there really new things? Did the Foreign Office actually think, and you get this sometimes when people have conflicts of interest, did they genuinely think that actually, we've put in place things which mean that those risks won't materialise because the security vetting flagged some stuff, and we are pretty confident we've got a decent way of dealing with that, and that will allow something that the Prime Minister clearly thinks is a politically advantageous appointment. It looks a bit ironic now, but he did at the time, in terms of managing the relationship with Trump. We'll let that go ahead. And remember, this comes very shortly after the Prime Minister has made that speech, his December 2024 speech, getting my years wrong now, December 2024 speech, where he accused the civil service of frustrating ministers, being in what he called the tepid bath of managed decline. Ollie Robbins is super new to the job. He's been there 3 weeks. He's presented with this. And I think Ollie Robbins, whatever you think about Ollie Robbins, sees himself as a can-do deliverer for ministers. And I think he will have thought that he's come up with a very clever way of helping the Prime Minister get what he wants. And he's not going to be jumping into the tepid bath with all the people that the Prime Minister thought that he had to get rid of because they were getting in the way of ministers achieving their objectives. I think there are different questions to be asked, and I'm sure the Foreign Affairs Committee will be onto this tomorrow, about why, when Mandelson was sacked, they didn't actually say more to the Prime Minister about what the process that the Foreign Office had gone through actually involved, that there were issues raised. We thought we'd found adequate mitigations, and that's why we gave him clearance. And I don't know why they didn't say that to the Prime Minister. I'm sure we will hear that from Ollie Robbins, whether he thought that actually the terms of the act under which he was acting was so clear on the confidentiality of the vetting process. We know Number 10 contests that. They absolutely couldn't say anything about it at all to the Prime Minister. But we'll hear from Ollie tomorrow.
Does it surprise you that somebody that had to resign from the cabinet on 2 separate occasions and was on the payroll of a company whose parent owners make Russian drones, that somebody of that ilk and with that CV should even be a contender for UK ambassador to the United States?
It was a very unusual appointment. Anything to do with Peter Mandelson is usually pretty unusual, and this was an extremely unusual appointment. But Donald Trump's a very unusual president, and clearly people in Number 10 thought that the very distinctive political skills Mandelson brought. Remember, quite a lot of people at the time said this is an inspired appointment, this is really clever, this will be very good. And, you know, although there was some skepticism of the Trump White House, Mandelson sort of did what they asked him to do. I mean, he landed quite successful bilateral for Starmer. He landed that UK, in inverted commas, trade deal and things like that. I mean, yeah, Mandelson was actually showing in that sense that, oh, maybe he was a good appointment. It was other things that brought Mandelson down.
Well, you know as well as I do, Jill, Peter Mandelson is a canny political operator, one of the architects of New Labour and 3 election landslides, and the schmoozer in chief.
Yeah, and he schmoozed very successfully. The interesting thing about Peter Mandelson is Peter Mandelson is a great political strategist, and what he should have said to Keir Starmer is, look here, I'd love the job. I think I'd be really quite good at it. But frankly, I come with a freight load of baggage and you'd be bonkers to appoint me. And then we would have all been living with maybe a less flamboyant, but more mundane appointment. And the relationship might not have ever peaked in that way, but it might not have bounced back in quite the way that it has now.
Jill, you've got to come back on the show presently because we enjoyed your input, your experience, your judgment on this story. Jill Rutter, Senior Fellow at the Institute for Government, who is suggesting there, very interestingly, that perhaps Ollie Robbins' great crime is executing the will of Number 10 and essentially interpreting the rules favourably to get that appointment across the line. Has Ollie Robbins paid the price for delivering for Starmer and delivering for the government? Here's a voice note from Jules. No, hold fire. Do you want to do a call or voice note first, Finlay? Okay, let's get a voice note from Clark. Thank you. It'd be useful if I could read, wouldn't it?
Good afternoon, Mark. Regardless of the fairy tale that our Prime Minister might spin in the Commons this afternoon, I think there's another target here that has not yet been put into the crosshairs, and that's our security services. They are the people who conducted the DV on Mandelson. They knew exactly what the truth is, and yet they kept silent throughout this whole process over months. So surely they have a role to play here in culpability. They've allowed Mandelson, a great security threat, to walk through the corridors of power in Washington and get away with it. Why didn't they stand up and say something when they knew the Prime Minister wasn't? Surely heads have got to roll in that area as well. Great show. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Clark. An excellent voice note. We've got more voice notes coming. Helen and Sean and many others will get to you. But Jules is in Bedford. Hello, Jules.
Mark, hi. So, your last caller, she's just teed me up beautifully, your voice note you just had, because the name that should really be on people's lips today is Jonathan Powell.
Yeah.
He is, to remind ourselves, Keir Starmer's hand-picked national security advisor. So, is there a world in which Ollie Robbins knows that Mandelson has failed vetting? He doesn't, for whatever dumb reason, think he can talk to Mr. Starmer about it. The first person he's going to call has got to be Jonathan Powell.
And that's the person, Jules, that David Maddox contacted via WhatsApp prior to the front page splash that Mandelson had failed vetting in September of last year.
Yeah, exactly.
We have the WhatsApp exchange. It's been screenshotted. Do we have the smoking gun, therefore?
I think we do. So now it's time to put on your tinfoil hat. We know this Labour government is fawning all over China. Ed Miliband goes out there, he signs the secret memorandum of understanding, never disclose what the terms of the trade deal with China are. Labour whips its piece to vote down the anti-slave Labour amendment to the Great British Energy Bill, if you remember that appalling occurrence. We give away Diego Garcia for the simple reason, of course, that it favours China because it emasculates the American use of that base.
We didn't join the war against Iran, which is bad news for China. We're buying their stupid solar panels, which are all net zero, is going to enrich the Chinese economy to an order of magnitude we've never seen in history, Jules.
So here it is, Mark. Here it is. Peter Mandelson wasn't hired as ambassador to the US despite his links with Russia and China. He was hired precisely because of them.
OMG. Jules, briefly, because I need to pay the rent, what's going to happen? Do you think Ollie Robbins will throw the PM under the bus tomorrow?
I think he'll choose his words so carefully it will have that effect.
Wow. And the Prime Minister, I mean, basically not long for this world politically, right?
No, he's gone. The question is, can we get rid of Antonio Romeo, because she knew and didn't tell the Prime Minister, and Jonathan Powell? So all these, how can I put it, unflushable objects can all go down the same U-bend together.
God, that's so much better than my Dolan's dispatch. You're absolutely right to point that out. Romeo, who of course is the Cabinet Secretary, the top civil servant in the country, sat on this information for 2 weeks, but she's not been fired. I'm so confused. Jules, what a great call. Keep them coming. Is Keir Starmer a liar? Your call's next.
any minister, whether it's the most important one, the Prime Minister, lying to the House of Commons is a capital offence and would have to go.
The week before the attack, he was off to try and do a different attack, and he was eventually stopped by his dad. So the second time it happened, where they also knew he ordered a cab and took out a knife from the house, they never once called the police.
First rule of politics, don't slam the Pope. Don't have a go at the Pope, because you lose the Catholic vote at a stroke. I'm not a big fan of Pope Leo. I like his brother.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
So political history is playing out live and uninterrupted here on Talk. At 3:30, the Prime Minister is expected at a House of Commons Select Committee. We are bringing you uninterrupted coverage. We're going to hold the ad breaks. You don't want to be anywhere else. We've got the story. Ringside seats for the political action in a week that could see the fall of our Prime Minister. So we've got it covered on Talk. Don't go anywhere. The Prime Minister live from the House of Commons on Talk at exactly 3:30. Up till that point, we're going to bring analysis and some of the biggest names in the media and politics. Our question today is a simple one. Is Keir Starmer a liar? Lee is in Salisbury. Hello, Lee.
Hi, Mark. How you doing? Yeah, I'm actually in Bournemouth now. I moved to Bournemouth, but nice to hear.
Oh, you're in Bournemouth. Lucky you. I love Bournemouth. And it's got a very big beach, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. Mark, I just wanted to make a point. I listen to the show every day. Love it. But this Keir Starmer, it's almost like I'm in an abusive relationship with him now. All the time, it's a case of lies. He never admits anything. When he's caught out, he blames everybody else.
Yeah.
He never takes responsibility for his own actions. And it just feels like even when he's banged to rights, he'll come out and say, no, it wasn't me, it was somebody else, and he'll sack everybody. So that just shows you what type of character is. He's not a man. He just blames everybody else and then and tries to get away with it.
Well, which is it, Lee? Is he a lawyer or a liar?
I think they're a bit of both.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I think he's a liar. And listen, me and my friends and my colleagues, we look at the situation and we go, this guy, who does he think he is? Does he think the British public are really that stupid? I mean, we're not. We can see what he's doing. And like I say, it's like being in an abusive relationship with a narcissist that just never admits he's done anything wrong. And then he'll turn around and say, oh, but I've given free school dinners to children, just to try and say that he's done something good. But he's done so much bad now, he's got to go.
He most definitely does. Lee, what a brilliant call. Have a great day and we'll speak soon. Lee, there in Bournemouth now, which is a beautiful part of the country. Let's take a voice note from Sean, if we can.
Now, my grandma told me when I was very young that if something doesn't make sense, then it's not true. And none of this Mandelson stuff makes sense. It absolutely stinks to high heaven. Everyone knows what's going on. Everyone knew what was going on, apart from the Prime Minister. Nah, he's just a blatant liar, or he's an absolute idiot. And I'm going to go for both, mate. Great show, Mark. Keep it up.
Sean, thank you for that. I think the problem the Prime Minister's got is reputational and political. So reputational, the guy's done so many U-turns and he's presented himself as one thing and turned out to be quite the opposite. That there's no well of goodwill within the British public and no one believes him. No one trusts this guy. You know, he speaks in Orwellian doublespeak. I'm going to smash the gangs and then illegal immigration goes up. Or we're going to grow the economy and then growth falls. It goes the other way. So it's the opposite of the truth. And that's the nature of this guy. He's incredibly shifty. Is Keir Starmer a liar? Mark is in Bristol in the West Country. Hello, Marky.
How are you, mate?
I'm very well indeed. What do you think of your Prime Minister? Is this a problem of character?
I think it's a lot worse than character, Mark. That man is a psychopath. He has to be. Look what he's doing to this country. He's fooled and embarrassed the whole country to the rest of the world. I think he's I think he should be charged with treason. He's an awful man.
Well, I will say, since he became Prime Minister, Mark, everything's got worse, hasn't it? We've seen higher inflation, economic growth has disappeared, businesses are closing, wealth creators are leaving the country. We've got the highest energy costs in the developed world. We've got the highest youth unemployment in the whole of Europe. It's not looking good.
And the man thinks we don't understand what he's done wrong. This is the part about it. He doesn't believe the people are onto him, you know. He's treating us like fools.
How important is this Mandelson story in the general scheme of things, Mark?
Well, I believe it's a diversion. I think there's much more important issues we should be getting on with in this country in order to save it, you know.
Well, of course, I mentioned the economy and I've mentioned energy costs and I've mentioned unemployment, but the other elephant in the room, Mark, is immigration.
Well, take Australia's policy. If you tried to break into Australia, you go into a detention centre and that is where you stay.
Yeah, Operation Sovereign Borders 2013.
Mate, I'm telling you, as cruel as it sounded, it ended it in Australia. That policy, as ugly as it appeared at the start, it worked. And believe me, the detention centres are not prisons. They have phones, they have 3 meals a day, they have 3 choices of meals a day. Serco security are gentlemen. They don't act like screws. So it's not a bad place for them to go.
But importantly, they don't have their freedom, and they shouldn't if they've entered the country illegally. Mark, what a fantastic call to end the hour. So much more to come. Live from the dispatch box and the House of Commons, the Prime Minister at 3:30. Uninterrupted coverage here at Talk. Ringside seats, the only place to be. Mark Dolan in for Ian Collins. Is Star Reliant.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Past 2, Mark Dolan in for Ian Collins all of this week, and breaking this afternoon, the Prime Minister fights for his political life. Keir Starmer will be at the dispatch box in the House of Commons at around 3:30 We have got ringside seats, uninterrupted live coverage. This is the only place to be. So, how much did the Prime Minister know about Mandelson's failure to pass security vetting? Live coverage of the Prime Minister's statement and, of course, the response from the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch. We're also going to speak to influential names in the world of politics and journalism. But most importantly, I want to hear from you this afternoon as we wait for the Prime Minister's statement. And it's a simple question. Is Keir Starmer a liar? My phone number is 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Leave us a voice note. And as the saying goes, let's talk. Now, I'm delighted to say that you can hear us on DAB+, in-app and online, but you can also watch the show. And if you want to see my coverage, watch my amazing guests and watch the Prime Minister live, then head to YouTube, search Talk, and miraculously up we pop. Now, one of the best connected journalists in the country is Kevin Schofield, who has posted the following on X. It sounds like Ollie Robbins, the former head of the Foreign Office, the chief civil servant at the Foreign Office, is going to come out all guns blazing tomorrow. That's right. Sounds like Ollie Robbins is going to come out all guns blazing tomorrow. Well, Kevin Schofield is the political editor of HuffPost UK, and he joins me now. Hi, Kevin.
Hi there, Mark.
Oh, that's quite an incendiary post that you've just shared on X. Do we need to bring our popcorn tomorrow for that House of Commons Select Committee?
Well, it's funny you should say that, Mark. Actually, the person who I've been liaising with, who would know what Ollie Robbins is going to be saying tomorrow, sent me a popcorn emoji about the appearance. And then when I replied, you know, I've been in the game long enough, I've seen a few damp squibs in my time, and they replied with another popcorn emoji. So I think we can safely assume that it's going to be pretty box office stuff. It doesn't sound like Ollie Robbins is going to go quietly.
No, he's paid for this scandal with his job. It's my understanding, Kevin, that it's a six-figure payout at least. And he also is taking legal advice about whether he's been dismissed unfairly. So he has no reason at this point to protect the Prime Minister.
No, absolutely. He has literally got nothing to lose. He's lost his job. He owes Keir Starmer nothing. He certainly doesn't owe him any loyalty. And, you know, there's a reputational issue here as well. Keir Starmer undoubtedly will try and lay the blame at Ollie Robbins' door in the House of Commons this afternoon. And then it'll be over to Ollie Robbins then to basically give his side of the story. And there's absolutely no reason why he would seek to soft soap it or defend the Prime Minister in any way. He'll hit back, and he'll hit back hard, I think.
Could he be limited in any way, given his role as the top civil servant in the Foreign Office, in what he says tomorrow? Is he bound by the Official Secrets Act or any other such restrictions, do we think, Kevin?
Yeah, I dare say we won't be commenting on anything certainly to do with national security. You know, he's a very experienced public servant. He will know what he can and can't say legally, but I think he's still got a fair amount of leeway to discuss this particular issue about Peter Mandelson, and he can discuss the process and his understanding of the process. And quite a lot of his friends have been coming out in the media since he lost his job to say, you know, basically he was following the letter of the law. He was not allowed, they say, to tell Keir Starmer about this, so he should not have paid with his job. So yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what he has to say, and then how it all plays out. You know, has he been unfairly dismissed by a panicking Prime Minister?
I just wonder whether Sir Ollie Robbins is a victim of his own success, that what these civil servants exist to do, Kevin, as you know, is to fulfil the will of the elected government. Number 10 wanted Mandelson in that top diplomatic role, and Ollie Robbins made it happen, and now he's paying the price.
Exactly, that is the great irony here, isn't it? Is that Ollie Robbins would appear to have been ensuring that his political master, the Prime Minister, got what he wanted. And we know that he wanted Peter Mandelson to be the ambassador to the USA. We know that he wasn't going to be put off by his links to Jeffrey Epstein. He wasn't going to be put off by his links to China or Russia.
Yeah.
So I think it was safe, for Ollie Robbins to work on the assumption that nothing was going to stop Peter Mandelson getting this job, and he was basically helping to facilitate that.
I mean, I'm mystified that it got as far as vetting. This wouldn't happen, would it, Kevin, if you were applying for a job at the excellent HuffPost UK, if you had that much baggage? This is a guy that, you know, in Mandelson had to resign from cabinet twice, and on at least one occasion of those 2 occasions was, the claims against him were upheld. This is a guy that's taken in excess of £2 million from a company that makes drones for Russia, for the Russian military, links to the Chinese regime as well. It's astonishing that it got that far.
It is, and at the time, a lot of people were very surprised and pointed out the potential pitfalls and what a huge gamble Keir Starmer was taking by employing Peter Mandelson. But he was obviously heavily influenced, I think, by his chief advisor at the time, Morgan McSweeney, a close ally of Peter Mandelson. And he was telling him, look, you've got to get the guy in. He'll be a great appointment. He's got Trump's ear. He's so well connected. It's a bit of a left field appointment, but it really will pay off. And we also know that Keir Starmer didn't even bother to speak to Peter Mandelson face to face to put any of these concerns to him before appointing him. So yeah, you're right. Ollie Robbins, I think, with taking all that on board, thought, well, I've got to make sure that this happens, and he, I think, tomorrow will set out why he thinks he acted completely appropriately.
Now, in my humble opinion, Keir Starmer is a master of Orwellian doublespeak. He talks about growing the economy whilst it shrinks. He talks about smashing the gangs, stabilising the economy, that kind of thing. Well, you've seen the numbers, Kevin. Unemployment's going to reach 2 million people. This is the party of working people who, it turns out, are out of work. This is the other big problem we've got, is that we're discussing this Mandelson scandal whilst Rome burns. My viewers and listeners and your readers at HuffPost UK are really struggling, and this government's got big problems.
Huge problems. I mean, I think that this may not be the final straw for Keir Starmer, but certainly another potential nail in the coffin. I think it just adds to the weight of evidence against him. And a lot of Labour MPs share that opinion. They are tearing their hair out at the state of the government. And this Mandelson story has got a long way to run. I think there are more documents still to be released over who said what, when, and what they said. And, it could get even grubbier. And, of course, we've got these May the 7th elections as well, which I think everyone expects to be really bad for the Labour Party. So certainly no light on the horizon if you're Keir Starmer.
How significant a figure do you think David Maddox, the political editor of The Independent, is going to be in political history? Because this is the guy that reached out to Number 10 in September of last year, and we have the screenshotted WhatsApp conversation in which he says to this figure at Number 10, I think it was Jonathan Powell, National Security Advisor, but it's definitely somebody within the Number 10 operation, that it's the Independent understanding that Mr. Mandelson had failed security vetting and that it wasn't Epstein links but China. Can you advise? At which point he gets a response from Number 10 saying nothing to see here, all procedures were followed. It's then front page news in The Independent. So does it defy any sort of credibility that Number 10 were not aware of this story and this claim that Mandelson failed vetting?
Yeah, well, that was actually a text from David to Tim Allen, who was the communications director.
Oh, it was Tim Allen, right, yeah.
Yeah, a short-lived communications director, I have to say, appointed by Keir Starmer. And yeah, I mean, it's very difficult for Number 10 to then turn around and say, no one told us, when the director of communications got a text message from a highly respected senior journalist like David Maddox to point out that he had failed vetting. So again, that seems to be another difficult thing for Number 10 to try and explain.
Well,
so
are we over-interpreting, given the fact that it was front page news? You know as well as I do, there are lots of people at Number 10 that scour every front page. In fact, every syllable of every newspaper on a daily basis. That's their job. So it's hard to imagine that this story doesn't get back to McSweeney and therefore the PM.
Absolutely. Yeah, it defies belief, really. That would appear to be prima facie evidence that Number 10 were made aware of it. Now, whether Tim Allen fired off a very quick response and took it no further, who knows? But because he's now gone, that's the other thing. He can't be questioned about it because he's no longer in post either. But it certainly is another tricky issue for the government to try and talk their way out of, and we await to see whether any MP raises that specific point with Keir Starmer when he's in the Commons later on this afternoon.
Now, Kevin, I'm just thinking that the only way out of this for the Prime Minister is if the Foreign Office officials, led by Ollie Robbins, lied to Number 10. That if this story appears in the Independent on the 12th of September of last year, and somebody at Number 10 reaches out to a Foreign Office official and says, hey, can you stand this story up? Has Mandelson failed security vetting? At which point Ollie Robbins or someone under him says, not true, he did pass security vetting. That's the only circumstance in which I see Starmer walking free politically, or have I misread this?
No, potentially, and I guess if they were to say he did get the full clearance, then technically it would be true, because that's what Ollie Robbins did. He took on board what UK security vetting had said, but then decided to clear him because, as we discussed earlier, he knew that his boss wanted Mandelson in post. So I suppose we're dancing on the head of a pin a little bit there. But there will be a paper trail. And, as we discussed as well, we do know that Foreign Office civil servants, like all civil servants, really like to do things by the book. So it will be fascinating to see who said what to whom, and maybe that will help to shed some light on this entire mess. Does it feel a little bit like the plot line of the Mafia, not the Mafia, The Godfather to you, Kevin Schofield, where Number 10 have behaved like a mafia organisation with Starmer as Don Corleone? The idea is, I want you to take out my rival, Jack the Hat McVitie, but just make sure that there's no trail that comes back to me, the boss. Well, I can't imagine. I'm struggling to picture Keir Starmer as Don Corleone. It'd be a pretty unimpressive Michael Corleone, perhaps. But yeah, look, he famously said in opposition that, you never blame your staff, you always take responsibility. Well, there's a trail as long as your arm now of people who have paid with their jobs for Keir Starmer getting into difficulty since he became Prime Minister. Ollie Robbins is just the latest, unfortunately, for him. So yeah, it does look as though Keir Starmer, one thing he's very good at is protecting his job, but I wonder if he'll run out of road eventually. Yeah, briefly, Kevin, I mean, political predictions are a dangerous thing. Starmer is going to have a turbulent week. Of course, he's going to have to respond to what Ollie Robbins says at the House of Commons in the Select Committee tomorrow. Starmer himself is addressing the Commons from the dispatch box this afternoon at around 3:30. We're bringing live, uninterrupted coverage with ringside seats. He's then got the small matter of Kemi Badenoch on Wednesday at PMQs. So what kind of shape do you think he'll be in by the end of the week? I think he'll be battered and bruised, undoubtedly. I think there's a lot of pressure on Kemi Badenoch, actually, because, come Wednesday, we'll have, as you say, we'll have had this afternoon out the way, we'll have had the Ollie Robbins evidence session as well at the Foreign Affairs Committee. So he should really be, a bit of an open goal for her. So you would think if he manages to get to Wednesday evening and still in some sort of shape, then he's probably okay, I think, certainly in the near future. The thing that is still keeping him in position is none of the Labour MPs can agree on who should replace him. A lot of them don't want Angela Rayner as Prime Minister. A lot of them don't want West Streeting. They quite like Andy Burnham, some of them, but he's not an MP. So for now, Starmer, even badly damaged as he is still perhaps the least worst option for them. Kevin, a real pleasure to have you on the show. Fantastic to see you. Thanks for your valuable time on a very busy day. The political editor of the HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield. Always good for political scoops, that online newspaper. So much more to get through. Is Keir Starmer a liar? Now, folks, I've got to tell you, it's a very special show today, and it's all breaking news. So all you got to do is keep it talk, because the Prime Minister is live in the House of Commons at the dispatch box at 3:30. We're bringing build up. We've got ringside seats and, of course, a big response and analysis straight after. So don't go anywhere. This is Talk. Simple question this afternoon. Is Keir Starmer a liar?
Minister, whether it's the most important one, the Prime Minister, lying to the House of Commons is a capital offence and would have to go.
The week before the attack, he was off to try and do a different attack, and he was eventually stopped by his dad. So the second time it happened, where they also knew he ordered a cab and took out a knife from the house, they never once called the police.
First rule of politics, don't slam the Pope. Don't have a go at the Pope, because you lose the Catholic vote at a stroke. I'm not a big fan of Pope Leo. I like his brother.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk, the Prime Minister live at the dispatch box in the House of Commons at 3:30. Uninterrupted coverage here on Talk. You won't miss a second. Ringside seats. We're going to get rid of ad breaks, whatever it takes, to get you the biggest political story of the year. Is Keir Starmer a liar? Mary has called the programme. Hello, Mary.
Good afternoon, Mark. Yes, unfortunately, a proven one as well. The problem is, if he goes, it seems the rest of the cabinet are mostly consisted of liars as well. We've got Reeves lied about her CV, Reynolds lied about being a solicitor, what's her name? Rayner's lied about a tax business. So we're really...
The Transport Secretary stole a mobile phone. Corruption Minister being looked at for corruption.
Yeah, they're just a bunch of liars altogether. But, you know, this business with, what's his name, Mandelson, has connections with China and Russia. Well, and Starmer pressing for this man to be ambassador, Starmer's got a connection with China as well. So I'm wondering if there's something more going on behind this, because he was the one who pushed to have this massive embassy built. He's going on a trade tour over there, isn't he? He's going on a visit over there. And he seems to be having quite connections with China as well. So it makes me wonder if there's something a little bit more sinister as well.
Well, I wonder about that, because net zero, which of course this government has doubled down on, is very good news for the Chinese regime, because they're the ones that make the solar panels and the windmills. The Chagos Islands surrender was going to be great news for China, because Mauritius, who are going to get the Chagos Islands, is a Chinese ally and an economic partner. The list goes on, if you think about it. It's just not in the national interest. A lot of the policies have been in the Chinese national interest.
That's right, and I'm just beginning to wonder if there's something more sinister about all of this. You know, yesterday we went to, my daughter took me to Bexley, to a butterfly house, and on the way there we're going along the M25 and then we're up to the Dartford Tunnel. The vast amounts of huge warehouses, not one solar panel on them. Hundreds of these huge warehouses of different companies.
Ridiculous.
Now, there's if they're really, truly going to net zero, these things would be automatically connected with the grid, and they're all empty. So the whole lot, I mean, they're just the whole lot a bunch of liars.
Well, I can't disagree. I will say that confidence in this government and in the political class is at an all-time low. Mary, thank you for a great call. Christina is in East Sussex. Christina, is Starmer a liar?
Well, put it this way, he's so crooked he can't lie straight in bed.
Oh, my goodness.
And if he were he said he's a barrister, he's not fit to be a barista. Look, there's something going on. I hear what Mary said. There's something something just does not add up. Why would somebody who's a barrister, would therefore you have consequential thinking, because you can see many outcomes. Somebody who has no control over the sort of communications within his department and over the media. Why would he risk reputation, job, livelihood over one man's friendship? Now, when somebody does something like that, gives their all to one person, it's either through love, pecuniary gain, or blackmail. There is something that just doesn't add up.
I'm glad you said that. You have to follow the incentives. Who's got skin in the game? Who is going to gain politically or financially?
Yeah, and who knows something about what? I mean, my concern, and this is a concern, not an allegation or accusation, is that Epstein made many connections within the highest echelons of society and possibly even Parliament, and maybe there are some unsavoury little things of which Mandelson would be aware, because obviously he was staying in Epstein's flat and all that, knows a lot about the man. So maybe there are certain things which just don't need to come out. Otherwise, how does anybody get sacked and then demand a six-figure severance pay, has the audacity to do that?
Well, exactly. I know, and Christina, you're right about that. And if Ollie Robbins, this civil servant at the Foreign Office, if he's not allowed to tell the Prime Minister and Number 10 that security vetting has been failed, and then he doesn't tell the Prime Minister, well, then why does he get fired? Because if he's not allowed to tell the Prime Minister, then he's not done anything wrong.
And this is the worst form of bullying and the worst form of authoritarianism and poor leadership, is blaming somebody for your own mistakes. You see it in every poor workplace with a fast turnover of staff, is when the management doesn't take responsibility. I mean, he's either a liar or he's wholly incompetent and totally without honour or shame. And I think we need a general election now. I mean, goodness knows who'll get in, but as long as we get this crew out, the sooner the better, quite honestly.
Loved your company this afternoon. Christina, call me again soon. Christina in East Sussex there. Very, very good. What an interesting call that was. Is Keir Starmer a liar? Laura Jane is in Hampshire. Hello, LJ.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
I'm very well. What do you think about this? Do you trust your Prime Minister?
Everybody is covering everything, and obviously Mandelson got in to be the ambassador because he's got something on everybody. That's quite clear and rather old news. I mean, you don't have to be, everybody knows
Mandelson knows where the bodies are buried.
Of course he does. That's why he got the post. It's obvious, going way back to Blair. He's got stuff on everybody. But my main point is, it does not make sense, any of this. If the vetting process is not allowed to be told to the highest office of the land, or the second highest, i.e. the Prime Minister, it does not make sense. Why the heck would you have a vetting process if you can't tell people? I mean, it's ridiculous. It's like having the Moors murderer suddenly being appointed to some high office, and everyone saying, well, no one can say, what they did. And what is the point of having a vetting process? So, Starmer is but I have to say, I think he's going to get away with it again, because you hear Labour MPs spouting such rubbish and defending him to the hilt. And the reason being is they haven't got anybody that can take over yet. They haven't got their ducks in the row, maybe after May the 7th. But I think that Starmer, the puppet, because that's a better word, they can't remove him and won't remove him. They're not ready yet. And so we're stuck with him.
How lasting will the damage of this scandal be to the Labour brand?
Oh, huge. That's why they're not.
So you think this goes beyond?
Election.
Do you think it goes beyond Starmer, or do you think if a new leader comes in, they'll be able to wipe the slate clean?
No, Mark. What planet are you on? I mean, come on. No way. The Labour brand is ruined, and the country knows we need change, real change. We need to get rid of the blob for a start, because otherwise, as Liz Truss never stops saying, we can't do anything unless we change all that. We're, hidebound by what they tell us to do. It's a busted flush. The problem is that at the moment the Labour movement doesn't have anybody in place. I mean, actually, in a funny sort of way, we're better off with this man than than Ed Miliband or Angela Rayner. That would be ghastly.
Well, I mean, the problem you got with Starmer, in my view, Laura Jane, is that he's incompetent, but his replacement will likely be more left-wing. If you get Ed Miliband, Laura Jane, you're going to double down on net zero, and he's a big socialist. If you get Angela Rayner, she'll have the backing of the unions, and they'll be looking for their pound of flesh.
Yeah, that's why it's dangerous, utterly dangerous. So in a way, we're better off trying to get a general election and maybe somebody on the other side of the House calling a no vote, a vote of no confidence. I don't know how, you do that, because in theory, the no vote has to be the Labour Party has a Labour majority. But it's a disaster. We need to get the government out, not the leader. The leader is almost inconsequential to this whole charade.
Laura Jane, lovely to have you on the show. Make sure that you're listening at 3:30. This is Talk, and we're bringing you live, uninterrupted action in the House of Commons. This is the Prime Minister Keir Starmer at the dispatch box in the House of Commons at 3:30. We're bringing you the build-up. We've got ringside seats. You won't miss a second of the action. Let's take a voice note from Trev now. This is quite special, and it's a voice note in two parts. So our question today, is Keir Starmer a liar? Here's a voice note from Trev.
Trev from Boston. So we all know Starmer's on his way out. So here's just a little reminder of why we will all be glad to see the back of him. Letter to Keir Starmer. Dear Prime Minister, I am an old age pensioner from Bell End, West Midlands, living with diabetes, dementia, and whose winter fuel allowance of £300 was taken away, leaving me with just £15 a month to live on after paying for rent, council tax, and bills. This is not enough. So what do you of the Labour Party propose to do about it?
Now, that's very interesting. That is a voice note from Trev with a letter to the Prime Minister, and a little bird tells me we may be getting a response from the Prime Minister after this short break.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now, you are listening to Talk, and I'm delighted to say that at 3:30 we will finally hear from the Prime Minister from the dispatch box, live and uninterrupted here on Talk. You will not miss a second of the action. Ringside seats, the Prime Minister at 3:30. Before that, we're going to hear from big names in the world of politics and journalism in regard to the Prime Minister. Is Starmer a liar? Now, before the break, we had a voice note from Trev talking about Keir Starmer's terrible policies, how it's affecting people who are struggling on a day-to-day basis. Great voice note from Trev. Well, here's part two, which I understand is a response from the Prime Minister.
Letter back from Starmer. Well, let me tell you, there are so many people in this country today
who are far worse off than yourself. And it is the policy of the Labour Party to see that this position is maintained.
Trevor, thank you for one of the most creative and satirical voice notes we've ever had on the channel. So much more to come. Prime Minister live at 3:30, uninterrupted here on Talk. Let's get the views on a couple of big stories today from somebody that I've delighted to say interviewed in the past on many occasions, David Bannerman. And David Bannerman, let me tell you, is a former MEP, joins us now. David, I want to talk to you about the Brexit betrayal in just a moment, but your response to this Mandelson scandal engulfing the Prime Minister.
Well, I think it's very, very serious, Mark. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's the issue of whether he lied or not, Starmer, and I think that's going to become clearer. But what worries me more, actually, is, you know, who is running the government. I mean, if the Prime Minister can't be told the results of this vetting process, then I'm really worried about that, because civil servants are basically overruling directly elected ministers, and that's very dangerous.
Does this add up to you? Because how can the Prime Minister and his Chief of Staff and the Number 10 operation not know that Mandelson failed security vetting, but the political editor of The Independent, David Maddox, does?
Yeah, well, I know David, and I trust him on this. I mean, look, I think that's right. I mean, you know, the Prime Minister, they don't get told why they fail vetting. They just get told whether they passed or not. And, you know, did he not ask? You know, I mean, you can't just say, oh, well, it's vetted, the vetting process is complete, without asking the question, well, did he pass or fail? And I mean, that's very unclear. And I think the hearing like tomorrow with Ollie Robbins is going to be very interesting. It's going to be a terrible week for Starmer just before local elections. So will he be gone afterwards? It's possible, but they couldn't even get rid of Gordon Brown, you know, and he was a daft Prime Minister.
It's true. Diana has messaged the show, David, saying Starmer will not be replaced because he'll threaten a general election and every Labour MP will be out of a job.
Well, there was talk, it was reported last time he was under real threat, that was the message that went out. And that's what Sunak did, by the way. You know, he went to the country before he got a vote of no confidence. And, you know, I mean, Starmer could do that, bring the whole house down, say a plague in all your houses. It doesn't seem conceivable, but, you know, he could well be in a bruised mood.
David, you are a red-blooded Brexiteer, and I know that you are very pleased that we've exited the European Union eventually by 2020, following that plebiscite in 2016. Are you concerned about the direction of travel from this government in relation to the EU and the suggestion of aligning with single market rules?
Yes, I am very concerned about it. It's sneaky, it's salami slicing, it's returning to the EU bit by bit. It's taking us closer to what is known as the Norway model, which is you're in the single market, but you're not in the customs union. And I think that's the sort of gameplay. But even Norwegians, I know them. I work closely with them. Nay till EU is the group that campaigned against joining the EU. I mean, they want what we've got, which is a free trade agreement, which is much looser. The trouble with signing up to single market is a lot of laws come with it. A lot of control comes with it. It's not just about the market. It's far more than that. And it's wrong. And it's against what Brexiteers voted for, because ever vote for anything in British politics. And Starmer is setting his face against them.
And it will make future trade deals almost impossible, which was the great promise of Brexit.
I mean, even Starmer has admitted that, you know, he doesn't want to go back in the customs union because you lose your great trade deals. I mean, India, I worked on the India-EU trade deal for years, and it didn't happen. It went on and on, you know, they didn't negotiate it. We did, the UK did it in a few years. And it's better than EU's, you know, and it's worth billions. And so we would compromise all of this. We don't need a reset. We don't need to get close to the EU, which is fast going down the pan. I mean, France and Germany are in real trouble. We've got our own problems, but actually we're still ahead of them.
We are. UK growth has outpaced Germany since 2016. There was no flight of capital, no emergency budget, no spike in inflation or interest rates. Food price inflation has been lower than that of the EU. We're not paying £20 billion a year for the privilege of membership. Thank God we're out.
Well, absolutely, Mark. You're absolutely right. I mean, they said, we'd lose 1 million jobs, that there'd be an emergency budget, £35 billion in taxes. None of that happened. We're in a very strong position, and we could be much stronger if we, loosened our ties with the EU and not got run home to mummy again. That's what's going on. And
it's politics, not economics, isn't it, David?
It is, yeah. I mean, economic is not. I mean, look, our exports to the EU have gone up nearly 19%.
It's a record high. Our exports to the EU are at a record high. And as you mentioned, and people don't realise this, we trade freely with the EU with no tariffs.
Yeah, well, we've got a great trade deal. It's the best trade deal they've ever done, they said at the time. You know, and it's like, and as I said, I did 10 years on trade deals, and it's a very good deal. We don't need to mess it up. We don't need, especially at this point, to be paying out billions, 12 billion in fish, in order to get this mysteriously brilliant deal from the EU. I mean, it just seems to us we'll just allow them to come to our universities and take places from Brits and not pay their full fees, for example.
Well, what about the scandal of Erasmus? Because I think it's going to cost us in the region of £500 million, and it will benefit mostly youngsters in the EU, not here in the UK. And the Turing programme we had was truly global and a lot better value for money.
Exactly right. I mean, the fact is the EU has no university in the top 10 in the world, and we have at least 3, sometimes 4. And that's why they want to come to the UK. And they don't want to pay international fees, as, Americans have to pay coming, or Australians or whatever. And that's unfair. And you're absolutely right. I mean, actually, Brits would rather go to America or the Anglosphere than to Europe. And Erasmus is all about really the glory of the EU. Ultimately, we don't need it. Turing is global and much more, it's much cheaper. It's about 1/5 of the price. And yet, our students can go around the world and not just be confined to Europe.
And this will break your heart, because that cost of Erasmus, which again is politically motivated, is equivalent to what will have been raised from the raid on private schools, or indeed the brutal assault on the inheritance tax terms of farmers.
Yes, I agree. I mean, as I say, we're in a position now where we can't afford to be paying out billions to the EU. For what gain? I mean, if you just forget the reset, drop the reset, save billions, pay it towards the fence, for heaven's sake,
Yeah.
It's not getting us anywhere good. There's a lot of problems with it, but the cost is ridiculous.
It's crazy. It's a dying economic bloc. Briefly, David, a couple of quick points from you. Nigel Farage, according to the polls, may well be our next Prime Minister. He will seek to exploit the Brexit benefits, given the fact that he's one of the masterminds of Brexit in the first place. So he'll be the most pro-Brexit Prime Minister we've ever had. How irreversible will some of this salami slicing by the government be should Farage win power?
Well, there's a long way to go to the general election, by the way, but the point...
Could his hands be tied with the EU if he gets in?
Well, they'll try it, but, we have this thing, parliamentary sovereignty, which is why we left the EU.
Yeah.
Our parliament's sovereign. It can do what it wants, basically. But, I mean, they may try and fine us or threaten us. They'll definitely try and threaten us, But, at the end of the day, no one seems to accept that, the EU needs us a lot more than we need them, because we buy a lot more of their goods, their BMWs or a lot of produce, food produce.
Champagne, Roquefort cheese.
Yeah, I know. And that's the bottom line. That's why we got the best ever trade deal with the EU, by the way, is because we're such a great customer for it. But on that note, by the way, America, United States, is the biggest country It's the biggest trade partner by country. EU is bigger as a bloc, but by country, the US is huge and it's growing fastest. So, I think it's a lot of nonsense. Oh, by the way, I mean, we're talking about sort of holidaying earlier. One of the freedoms we have is we can buy jet fuel all around the world now, and we don't have this EU rule that says that 80% of jet fuel must be bought in Europe, which is going to stop a lot of European airlines, but hopefully not UK airlines that have that freedom. That's a Brexit freedom.
Speaking of airlines, just before we let you go, because we're going to hear from the Prime Minister at 3:30 live and uninterrupted here on Talk with ringside seats for all the action. Can we just big up, David, the Greek government who have scrapped EU fingerprint and facial scans for British travellers this summer because they want to welcome my viewers and listeners to Greece. It's an important part of their economy, sending out an important message, and it's a middle finger to EU bureaucrats.
Well, it is. I mean, it breaks their rules, and France seems to be breaking their rules, and Portugal's done it before now. It just shows you, I mean, basically, I love Greece. I love going to Greece. Go to Greece. Yes, wonderful. But the point is, they don't, it's an economic compulsion here. They don't want to lose our business. It's a bit like that trade deal I was talking about. It's the bottom line is they would lose, hundreds of thousands of British holiday makers, and they don't want to do that. And good for them. And
most definitely.
That will follow now.
David, lovely to see you again. It's been far too long. Let's catch up in the very near future. My thanks to David Bannerman, former MEP. Is Keir Starmer a liar? This from an unnamed texter. Hi, Mark. Character is fate. Look at Bambi and Mandy, the two poster peas of the New Labour pod. And yet, despite both being schmoozers, they've had such different fates. Of course, talking there about Tony Blair and Peter Mandelson. This from Rob in Burnley. Hi, Mark. I can see a situation where Starmer feels hard done by here. I think Mandelson was thrust upon him in a last-ditch effort to get those Epstein files kicked into the long grass. Where I lose all sympathy for Starmer is where he puts himself forward as this paragon of virtue, when in reality it is the opposite. We'll get to more of your thoughts on that in just a moment. Is Keir Starmer a liar? Keir Starmer live on this show at exactly 3:30 from the Dispatch box. Uninterrupted coverage, ringside seats. Next up, Reform UK pledges to send almost 500,000 asylum seekers home if they win the next election. What's the story? We'll find out next.
any minister, whether it's the most important one, the Prime Minister, lying to the House of Commons is a capital offence and would have to go.
The week before the attack, he was off to try and do a different attack, and he was eventually stopped by his dad. So the second time it happened, where they also knew he ordered a cab and took out a knife from the house, they never once called the police.
First rule of politics, don't slam the Pope. Don't have a go at the Pope, because you lose the Catholic vote at a stroke. I'm not a big fan of Pope Leo. I like his brother.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk, and let me tell you, at exactly 3:30, we'll go straight to the House of Commons and the Prime Minister at the dispatch box. And of course, he'll be pressed by the Leader of the Opposition and MPs across the House in relation to what he knew and didn't know about Peter Mandelson failing security vetting for the biggest job in diplomacy. The Prime Minister live on Talk at exactly 3:30. Ringside seats. You will not miss a second of the action. Well, speaking of the action, Nigel Farage has made a quite significant headline today because Reform UK are pledging an immediate review of all asylum claims from the last 5 years if they win the next election. Around 400,000 people would be liable for deportation under the plans, which would target anybody granted asylum, overstaying a visa, or from a country deemed safe by a Reform-led government. Now, Reform have previously announced that they would bar anyone arriving on a small boat and suggests this could mean 600,000 deportations over 5 years. They want to tear up the ECHR to make removals easier and abolish the right to permanent settlement in the UK after 5 years. Reform's Home Affairs spokesman Zia Youssef said the scale of deportations under a Reform government would be unprecedented in this country. He said, "We're not going to allow the British people's goodwill to be taken advantage of." He set out how he believed building modular detention capacity for 22,500 people would allow that many to be deported each month, as had been done in the United States. Plus, he wants to turn off welfare for anyone arriving illegally, putting an end to free accommodation and what he calls an endless merry-go-round of appeals. Well, let's get a response from somebody that's been on the show many times and really enjoy his company, Myron Nathan. Myron, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you too. Thank you.
What do you make of this policy?
Well, the key word is retrospective. I mean, every time we see images of the boats coming over with hundreds of men coming across the shore, there is a sense that Britain is committing suicide. I mean, when we see daily attacks of sexual assault, billions being wasted in accommodation, and frankly from people from culturally incompatible countries, Afghanistan and the like. And then you have people like Alison Pearson, who kind of broke a story about what's going on in the Home Office, about how these asylum claims are actually being processed, where whistleblowers are actively saying we are really potentially approving rapists who are likely to commit sexual assault going forward. They know they're approving these individuals, and yet they're being granted asylum. So something horrific has actually happened, and the key word again is retrospective, because I believe that if we want to avoid civil unrest and complete despair in this country, any future government has to be looking retrospectively at the damage that's been done, not just to the future.
So this is reversing the damage and the long-term cost of the so-called Boris wave. It could mean up to 600,000 deportations over 5 years.
Well, I think it's 600,000 plus a further 400,000. So if I'm correct on that. So
a million.
Yes, exactly. And so this is an incredibly ambitious plan. And then people might be saying, well, these are huge numbers. How are you going to do it? And I think Zia Yusuf in the press conference made a really good point where he said that the problem is no one actually believes there's going to be any enforcement. And once people actually start to see that enforcement is actually being enacted, then they themselves will self-deport. So they're relying on a huge amount of individuals just saying, look, if I get a little bit of money, if I get my flight paid to go back home, then I will just self-deport. I mean, if you look at the scenes in Clapham, why is there just why is shoplifting just effectively legalized? Because there is no consequence. People have faith that there'll be no consequences. But if people have faith that they'll be actually deported, then they will self-deport. And I think that's where the Zia Yusuf is coming from.
And of course, this other policy of detaining anyone that enters the country illegally and then deporting them is bound to provide a disincentive to the boat crossings.
Everything is about disincentive. I mean, I've always said, look, leaving ECHR, you know, the UN Convention, all of the Refugee Convention, all of that stuff, the primary
Human Rights Act,
Human Rights Act, all of that is incredibly important. But if all we did was just detain everybody who came in on the boat, that in itself, I believe, would stop the flow. But to allow these individuals to just roam the streets freely is insane. It's beyond insanity.
It is. I still cannot process the idea that if you enter the country illegally, you're given pocket money, 3 meals a day, access to a dentist and a GP, which you, myself and our viewers and listeners don't find easy to achieve. It's quite astonishing, and it's not fixing the problem, closing the migrant hotels, because it's as bad, if not worse, to have homes of multiple occupancy in which these undocumented men, Myron, are existing and living in our communities, in our neighbourhoods.
Yeah, they're being actually inserted deeper and deeper into our streets, into our communities, as you said. But I want to go back to a point here, is that what we have in the combination of Zia Yusuf and Nigel Farage is, for the first time in many decades, we have a potential Home Secretary who is a man on a mission, who is tenacious, who is ruthless for the British citizen, for the justice of the British citizen. And we have a Prime Minister who is also on the same page. And if you think about Suella Braverman, how she was trying relentlessly against Rishi Sunak, and even today, Shabana Mahmood seems to be completely at odds with Keir Starmer and his backbenchers. This is the first time we'll have a government, potentially in the future, where the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister have the political will to actually implement these policies. I think that's what's been severely lacking.
Are you concerned it could play out in the way that things played out in the United States with the ICE raids, which became politically very, very unpopular?
Well, I think Nigel outlined a response to that. He said we have to learn lessons from Donald Trump's methodology, and perhaps I think he was steering towards a more Obama-style situation where, as I said, self-deportations becomes the main kind of implementation of how this policy is going to play out. So I think if we go down that route and we make the case to the public about how the necessity for this is so needed, then I think that will be fine.
Myron, is this policy racist?
Absolutely not. I mean, look, we need to understand these are not asylum seekers, and wording really matters here. If you're an asylum seeker, you're somebody who is fleeing a war-torn situation, potentially torture, and you have a case to be heard and therefore a case to be processed. If you're an illegal immigrant who has broken into the country, you are a criminal. And if you're a criminal, you should be detained, you should be imprisoned, you should be deported. And so I think language is really, really important here. These are not asylum seekers. These are illegal immigrants. Illegal means you have broken our laws, and therefore you do not deserve the taxpayer money that you're receiving or the goodwill of the British people.
And this doesn't just pertain to illegal immigration, does it, Myron? Because the so-called Boris wave, who entered the country legally from 2021, supposedly to fill a skills gap and to stop inflation exploding during and after the pandemic, that comes with a big long-term bill. You're looking at 2.5 million people that came here over a few years, and there are some suggesting that the long-term cost to the exchequer and the taxpayer is £250 billion. The reason being that even if you are working in a care home or some such, a fruit picker, you're going to be reliant on state handouts, in-work benefits, subsidised housing for the rest of your life. A possible bill £250 billion.
Yeah, I mean, this is why Zia Youssef and Nigel Farage have kind of made the case, almost sort of pleading with the Prime Minister to not U-turn and support Shabana Mahmood on her policy. I mean, it is a weak policy, relatively speaking, but nonetheless, it does kick things down the road.
Step in the right direction. Shabana Mahmood, Labour Home Secretary, acknowledges the problem and the cost, Myron.
Yes, she does. And I think she's on the right page. But the problem is it's what I think Gwen Towler coined Mahmood music, which is that it's rhetoric, it's talk, but effectively she has no power because the Prime Minister and her backbenchers and her party does not support her. And that's the problem. So, look, Reform are going to abolish a definite leave to remain. That is what every party should be looking to do.
Lovely to see you again, Myron. You must join us soon. What a lovely car you've got, by the way. Look at that. He's a man of means, is our Myron. Let's catch up soon, Myron. Myron Senthil Nathan is a member of Reform UK. Well, folks, it's all happening. I mean, what a time to be on air. What a time to be alive. The Prime Minister faces questions in the House of Commons. He's going to make a statement from the dispatch box about what he did and didn't know about the failure of Peter Mandelson to achieve security vetting. He's live at 3:30. We're bringing uninterrupted coverage, ringside seats for all the action. Don't go anywhere. We're going to get rid of ad breaks and everything. We're tearing up the running order because it's the only story in town. It's a question of character, isn't it? And this is very, very political. Can the Prime Minister survive? Is there anyone there to replace him? Has he been telling the truth? What do you think about this? That's our question this afternoon. Is Keir Starmer a liar? Do you believe a word he says? My phone number is 0344 499 1000. The Prime Minister is next on Talk. Don't go anywhere.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
2 minutes past 3, a very good afternoon. It's going to be a tough afternoon for the Prime Minister. I'm Mark Dolan, in for Ian Collins all of this week. And what we're witnessing here on Talk is political history playing out before our eyes and before our ears. The PM will be at the dispatch box in just half an hour's time, live and uninterrupted here on Talk. We're bringing you ringside seats. Just how much did he know about Mandelson's failure to achieve security vetting? And my question to you this afternoon is a simple one. Is Keir Starmer a liar? Do you believe his defence? 03444991000. Can he survive this scandal? We'll bring you live coverage of the Prime Minister's statement, plus the reaction of other MPs and the leader of the opposition. And we'll hear from the most influential names in politics and journalism. So a big hour to come. Join the conversation, 03444991000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. Leave us a voice note, and as the saying goes, let's talk. So you can hear the Prime Minister live at 3:30 via DAB+, in-app and online, and many in record numbers are as we speak. You can also watch the Prime Minister and watch this show. Just head to YouTube, search Talk, hit the live button, and you will see our programming output. So much to get through. Is Keir Starmer a liar? Your calls shortly, but let's get the thoughts of Brendan O'Neill, chief political writer at Spiked Online and the star of The Brendan O'Neill Show. Hi, Brendan.
Hi, Mark. How's it going?
I'm very well indeed. Well, how much trouble is the Prime Minister in?
I think he's in a lot of trouble. And I think he maybe doesn't realise how much trouble he's in because he seems to think he can ride it out. But, you know, if this scandal doesn't bring him down, I don't know what it will take. And the most striking thing about Starmer and his government is that we knew they didn't really believe in anything. We knew they didn't have any strong political ideas or ideology or much faith in the future, but they always advertised themselves as capable. They would be the sensible adults, the technocrats. They would always abide by process and make sure every I was dotted and every T was crossed. Now we know they can't even do that. This is a managerial cast of politicians who aren't even very good at managing politics. And that's what's been exposed by this scandal. And Starmer has big questions to answer.
Well, I completely agree, because it's my view, Brendan, that Keir Starmer is a pathologically dishonest politician. He just defaults to untruth in an almost Tourette's-like fashion. The manifesto was the greatest work of fiction since War and Peace. There was no mention of the Chagos Islands sellout or that pensioners would be shivering in their homes. We were told, I think, of in the region of £6 billion worth of increases in tax. We got 60 billion. No mention of digital ID. There was the Orwellian doublespeak that we're going to grow the economy and smash the gangs. The opposite has happened. So it's definitely my view that Starmer is a dishonest politician. But is he a dishonest man too?
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of, if he is a dishonest politician who's been running the country dishonestly, that probably suggests he's a bit of a dishonest man. I mean, you know, at some point, a man's conscience needs to kick in and he needs to say to himself, what am I doing here? Because you're absolutely right, Mark. So much of the stuff that they're pursuing was not in the manifesto. Some of what they're pursuing is the opposite of what they told us they would do. They've sold us a pub time and time again. They have openly lied to us and tried to do things that they promised us they wouldn't. So how can we trust him? How can we trust any of them? And I do think there's probably an issue of dishonesty with him, because at some point, most normal, morally switched on people would think to themselves, what am I doing here? What have I been up to? Why am I not adhering to what I said to the people I would do? But I think the one thing he has in his corner at the moment is the weakness of the Labour Party itself. And I think the only reason he hasn't been pushed out, even with this huge Mandelson scandal, is because there's no one in the party with any gumption or with any sense of leadership that would be any better than his, who is able to push him out, who's able to say, listen, we're going to take the reins because you have failed. So he's surviving by the skin of his teeth because of the uselessness of the Labour Party and the Labour government. That's what's really shocking.
Yes, and what we're seeing from Starmer is the opposite of the brand that he presented himself as in July of 2024 and the election, because he pitched to the public that he was the grown-up in the room, that he was going to be straight with the public, we'd have decent politics, a government in service of the nation, and someone with a command of the detail. Well, good luck with that, because he claims complete ignorance in relation to Peter Mandelson.
It's his whole shtick has been blown up by this. I mean, every single last claim he made for his right to rule, essentially, which is that he was sensible. He was like a manager. He would be, you know, he might be a bit boring, but at least he was honest and would get things done. All of that has collapsed. Every single bit of it has collapsed. And, you know, they also said when they came to power that they would wipe away 14 years of Tory sleaze. There'd be no more scandals under us. And we had all these commentators kind of sucking up to Keir Starmer, saying, at last we can breathe a sigh of relief because normal people are back in charge. That's all been exposed as a complete lie. And it's, you know, the really shocking thing in the Mandelson scandal is, if it's true that Starmer didn't know what was going on and didn't know that the Mandelson had failed the vetting, that actually makes it worse. That makes it worse than if he was just pulling the wool over our eyes and he did actually know, because that would suggest that he just doesn't know what's happening in his own government. He hasn't got a clue who's steering this ship, who's in charge, what's been done behind his back. This is a man who's in charge but not in power, and that's quite scary for the country.
Well, it's amazing that the political editor of the independent newspaper, David Maddox, knew about Mandelson's failure to pass security vetting in September of last year. He reaches out to Number 10 in relation to that story. He screenshots his conversation on WhatsApp with Number 10. It's front page news. That information somehow miraculously doesn't reach the Prime Minister. Meanwhile, Ollie Robbins appears to have paid a very high price. He's lost his job. Do you think he'll come out fighting tomorrow?
It kind of depends on what kind of deal he might have been offered, and maybe he signed a few contracts or documents saying you can't say this, you can't say that. Maybe he's been offered a peerage at some point in the future. We don't know. But he does seem to have been the sacrificial lamb for a scandal that actually implicates the entire government. And that feels profoundly unfair to me.
And Brendan, we're having this conversation about Mandelson whilst Rome burns. 70,000 illegals since Starmer got into Number 10. Inflation climbing again. The special relationship in tatters, the aborted Chagos Islands surrender, the return of unemployment. We're expecting the figure to top 2 million for the first time in a decade. Growth non-existent. Companies closing down, wealth creators leaving the country. That's the broader picture.
You know, I try so hard not to be a doomerist about Britain, and I've never been one of those people who says London has fallen and Britain is finished, because there's still so much good in this country. There's still so much common sense out there. There are so many decent people out there who are going out every single day, working hard, bringing up their families and living well. And that's still true. But you're absolutely right to raise these concerns, because things feel really bad at the moment. And to your list, I would only add at the same time that we've got these attacks on Jewish institutions in London that the police and government seem incapable of getting on top of. As you say, we're not in control of our borders. People are pouring across it almost every day. We're not in control of our economic future. We haven't become energy independent in the way that we should. We have become a second-rate country under these second-rate politicians. And that is such a betrayal of the British people, who just want a better future in which Britain is a richer, more comfortable, safer country. And that's not much to ask for.
Yes, I mean, in relation to Starmer, what did he say? Country first, party second. Well, I need to recalibrate that order. I think it's Starmer first, party second, country last.
Absolutely. The country's way down his list of priorities. You know, this is the really sickening thing about the Mandelson scandal right now. As you say, it feels like Rome is burning, or certainly the flames are starting to flicker. And we've got a government that is more interested in saving its own backside than in addressing the problems in the country. They've made this rod for their own back. They are the ones who brought this scandal upon themselves. But it just about sums up the entire political class, and including sections of the media class, that we, all of us, are obsessing over the Mandelson scandal, which is a big scandal, while at the same time the country feels like it's going to rack and ruin. And I think there will be people out there saying, okay, it's really bad that he wasn't vetted or he failed his vetting, but what about the 750 men who will turn up on our shores over the next 24 hours who haven't been vetted at all, and who will end up living in a hotel at the end of someone's road and might do things they shouldn't do? So there are so many scandals in this country, and the government doesn't seem capable of getting a handle on any of them.
Can I get a quick line from you on this announcement by Nigel Farage and Reform UK that they will seek to deport up to 400,000 people if they win the next general election? Is it the right thing to do, and is it even possible?
You know, it is possible if the will is there. And the thing that I find quite shocking now is the idea that it's somehow racist or tyrannical to deport people. Every country on earth has rules about who can come to the country, how long they can stay for, whether they can work or not. And at some point, they will say to you, oh, you need to leave now. I mean, Australia kicks people out every day of the week because they are allowed to come for 2 years to work and then they've got to go home. Every country on earth does this. But somehow we've got this idea amongst the chattering classes in Britain that making people go home is some kind of fascist activity. I have no idea where that idea came from. It is completely ludicrous. It is absolutely the right of a sovereign nation to say to people, you've had your fun, you've done your work, you now need to leave. And I think it's quite reasonable for Reform to set out that plan. And it is very doable if they clear away all those layers of bureaucracy that stop the government from doing what it wants to do.
Brendan, you've written powerfully about the plight of British Jewish people since October the 7th in your Spiked Online column and on the Brendan O'Neill Show, which is an unmissable podcast. Well, we've got an update on that story because police have been accused, as you mentioned just a moment ago, of failing to protect the Jewish community from Iran-backed thugs for hire after another firebomb attack on a synagogue. Jewish leaders have warned that anti-Semitism in the UK is gathering momentum after a projectile through a window at the
is now a moral emergency. This really is. It's a huge scandal. The rise of anti-Semitism is genuinely quite shocking. You know, let's just think about this. We now have synagogues being firebombed in London in 2023. It's like something out of early 1930s Germany. Now, some of those, thankfully, the 3 firebombings that happened last week were not successful. They did not ignite, but it only takes one ignition of a firebomb for real tragedy to strike this country and our Jewish compatriots. It's scandalous, and the left is saying nothing. The supposedly anti-fascist left has nothing to say about the firebombing of synagogues. Liberals are pretty stum about it. The kind of people who said Brexit was like the 1930s seemingly have nothing to say about this behavior that really is like the 1930s. The government is too busy with its own scandals. We are betraying our Jewish compatriots, and that is really unforgivable. And as you say, you can measure the civilization of a nature by whether its Jewish population is safe. That's what we know from the 20th century. And right now, it feels that Britain's Jews might not be safe.
Let me tell you that you can watch and listen to the brilliant Brendan O'Neill Show. You can see it on YouTube. You can hear it via any podcast platform. Brendan O'Neill is the chief political writer at Spiked Online. Brendan, thank you so much for your time. We'll catch up soon. The Prime Minister live in just over 10 minutes' time. Don't go anywhere. He'll be at the dispatch box. We're bringing uninterrupted coverage, ringside seats, only on Talk. Don't go anywhere.
Minister, whether it's the most important one, the Prime Minister, lying to the House of Commons is a capital offence and would have to go.
The week before the attack, he was off to try and do a different attack, and he was eventually stopped by his dad. So the second time it happened, where they also knew he ordered a cab and took out a knife from the house, they never once called the police.
First rule of politics, don't slam the Pope. Don't have a go at the Pope, because you lose the Catholic vote at a stroke. I'm not a big fan of Pope Leo. I like his brother.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk. It's Mark Dolan in for the brilliant Ian Collins. And let me tell you, it's all happening because the Prime Minister will be at the dispatch box at exactly 3:30. That's 10 minutes from now. You're going to get live, uninterrupted coverage here on Talk. Just don't go anywhere. You can hear it on the radio or you can watch it on YouTube. The Prime Minister live in 10 minutes time. We're bringing build-up, ringside action. Don't go anywhere. But can I also tell you about a very concerning story before we hear from the PM? Britain is being hit by a £100 million a year fill up and flee petrol station crime spree, sparked by soaring fuel prices. The 7-week Iran war has seen petrol prices jump by nearly 20% and diesel increase by 35%, which means that thefts of petrol at the forecourt are up by 30%, which is roughly equivalent. Let's get reaction now from the brilliant motoring journalist and former Top Gear presenter, Steve Berry. Hello, Steve.
Hello, Mark.
Really good to see you, Steve. This feels like shoplifting on 4 wheels.
I was in South Africa. I've tried to work out when it was. I thought it was 12 years ago. It's not. It's 13, ominously 13 years ago. And I've travelled quite a bit in Africa, and I got used to things being not like Europe or not like North America or the developed world. But what I noticed after a few days there was that I was obliged to pay for everything in advance.
Yeah.
A glass of beer, a Mars bar, a tank full of petrol, a meal, everything was paid for in advance. And I think that's what we're going to have to get used to. And the other thing that I think is going to happen, and when I make these predictions and I say the amount of time, people are always quite surprised, but things move very fast in the modern world, don't they, Mark? I think within 3 years' time, you will not be able to pay cash for fuel. You will have to pay in advance. You will put your card in a machine. And just like in the States as well, and I'm sure a lot of people know this, in the States, you're obliged to pay up front a lot of the time. You put your card in the machine, you tell it how much in money or how much in fuel you want, and it dispenses that amount after it has been paid for. And that's what's coming here because, and again, this is a popular phrase in 2026, the trust society. Britain's operated as a trust society. Yeah. We give you a thing like a hot meal or a tank full of petrol or diesel, and we trust you to pay for it. Well, that's going, isn't it?
Well, it's a sad state of affairs, and it will be sad to normalise the prepaying of petrol. And also, Steve...
Everything.
Right. Yeah, as you say, a meal at a restaurant, anything like that, a round of drinks, the trust is crumbling. We don't want to normalise that. Also, I'm not convinced that people can plead poverty. I wonder whether, as with shoplifting, this is pure criminality.
Yeah, and it's also people who don't feel that the registration number on their car will lead directly to them. I'm sat in my lovely little MG at the moment, 31 years young. A real MG, by the way, made in Oxfordshire, not in blinking China, right? And if they look up my number, it comes directly to me at my home address. And yet, the way that vehicles are licensed, it comes back to the same thing. I'm sorry to bang this drum again, but I'm going to.
Bang it.
The registration of vehicles in this country relies on a trust-based system. And I've been in parts of the world where the government or the authorities get much more involved in the sale or the transfer of ownership in vehicles. We are very liberal. We're very trusting when it comes to that in this country. And some people abuse that. They operate vehicles that aren't registered in their name at their home address. And so they think, well, I can just drive off. And if they look at that registration number, it's not going to lead directly back to me. I wonder if you've seen, Mark, or you've had it already on Talk, where people are converting vans. You know those big water bowsers? Have you had this story yet?
No, tell me more.
The big water bowsers that people have seen on industrial estates that hold hundreds of gallons of usually water are being put in the back of scruffy old white vans, and then they are leading, instead of the fuel filler leading to the tank of the van, it's leading to these bowsers inside the van. And so again, here's something that's going to happen. Not even AI, just they're going to put a cap on the amount of fuel, because what they're doing is they're just letting it rock until they've got literally hundreds of pounds worth of petrol or diesel in these bowsers. And then they're in the back of a big old van and they're driving off. So again, I think they're going to cap the amount of fuel that you're allowed to have. It's been a trust-based system. We clearly can't be trusted. When I say we, I mean modern Britain.
Yeah.
Modern Britain can't be trusted. That's the problem. Oh, that could be somebody's slogan, couldn't it? Hey, expect to hear that one cropping up, Mark. Modern Britain can't be trusted. Rupert Farage will be saying it before you know it.
Of course they will. Well, listen, Steve, you know a slogan when you see one. And I've got to say, Steve Berry for Transport Secretary, the problem we've got is that what's happening on the forecourt is a metaphor for what's happening in our society. As you said, we're a high-trust society. That's being diminished with criminality and the ridiculous idea that people plead poverty. They're not. It's the same people that steal jars of Nescafe Gold Blend from the supermarket. They are crooks, end of. And Steve, the other problem you've got with this crime at the forecourt is that it's other motorists that will pay.
Well, again, broadening it out. Sorry to keep doing that, but yeah, I was in a Tesco the other day. It was a Tesco. I could have said a supermarket. It was a Tesco because that's Britain's most popular supermarket, I believe.
Yeah.
I was in one and the bloke started, I'm going to tell the whole thing. I'm going to say what happened. He was just armfuls of stuff, bottles of wine, whatever. It's this big old IKEA, you know, those blue IKEA bags
yeah.
that everybody has that take loads of stuff. They last forever. He's put into them. So I just, as he turned round, I just gave him a bit of a dig. I won't tell you what he did. He came back to wreak his terrible revenge. I didn't suffer in it, and nobody was physically injured in it. But we are paying for all of that wine that he was scuffling into his big blue IKEA bag. I tell you what, right, you cannot walk the streets of a city like Manchester without being offered stolen goods.
I know.
It's Dickensian. I had to catch a very early train to Southampton last week. I had to get up at 3:30, or boo-hoo you. Well, I did. I caught a very early train. It's quite away from Manchester, is Southampton. I got a very early train. I rode a hire bike into the centre of the city and then walked the rest of the way to Piccadilly Station. I was offered stolen goods 4 times. Literally sort of Fagin's gang type characters coming up to you out of the shadows in 2026 and showing you a supermarket bag full of low-fat butter and cold cuts of meat.
It is disgusting. As you said, it's Dickensian. Steve, you've woken up, and you've woken up a nation. It's utter madness. The social contract is crumbling, and it's endemic across our society. Steve, thank you so much for joining us. Apologies for anyone that was struggling with the line there, but I think it was fascinating what Steve Berry had to say. Motoring journalist, former Top Gear presenter. We're not in a good place, are we? Meanwhile, the Prime Minister may well be out of a job next week. He's live next. Keep it talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk, and we're just waiting for the Prime Minister to address the House of Commons. We're bringing uninterrupted coverage from Parliament of the Prime Minister's statement in relation to the appointment of Peter Mandelson as UK Ambassador to the United States. How much did the Prime Minister know in relation to Mandelson's failure to pass security vetting? So uninterrupted coverage. We've got rid of the running order and the ad breaks. It is just wall-to-wall Starmer and, of course, Kemi Badenoch and other figures from the opposition, backbench MPs. They will all have their pound of flesh. Whilst we're waiting for the Prime Minister, and I've got an eagle eye on the live footage from the Commons, let's hear from Carol, who is in Cornwall. Hello, Carol.
Hello, Mark. I would just like to say quickly that I agree with the previous caller named Mark. I believe Keir Starmer shows all the traits of a psychopath.
And what makes you say that, Carol?
Well, he will step over everyone and throw everyone that he can under the bus to get what he wants. He appears to have no conscience, no empathy. Remember Southport and the flowers that he took there.
He spent a nanosecond laying down some flowers in memory of the victims of Southport. He then ran off and said anyone concerned about mass immigration is far right.
That's right. I mean, he appears to have no conscience, no empathy. And also he's beginning to show a little violence, isn't he, last Wednesday with the Speaker?
Yeah.
Just because he was challenged. And I think he's quite a dangerous person. I mean, I don't know if you know, but approximately there are 2 psychopaths in every 100 people. And they don't have to be axe murderers, but they do show all the traits of a person like Keir Starmer, who really never takes responsibility and always blames someone else and will destroy other people's careers. And they really don't care because they don't have the ability to care.
Yes, Carol, it's your view the Prime Minister doesn't have a normal moral conscience. I will say the Prime Minister would contradict that account. He would say that he cares massively about the plight of the country and the British people. He's very clear. He's inherited an economic and political mess, broken public services, a strong mandate to lead the country into a better future. He believes that he's working very hard to make things better for ordinary working people. And many around Starmer will say he's a very good, very kind, very generous, moral and decent man. Now, Carol, that's not your view. One thing is certainly clear. He's never wrong, is he? Never seems to put his hands up, and it's always someone else's fault.
That's right. And, you know, we all, us normal people, we all make mistakes. But, I mean, his mistakes are really quite catastrophic. And of course, his mandate, you know, he's lied every way along the line. Now, liars are not people you can trust. You really cannot trust a liar. And that appears to be what he is.
Can you make a defence of Sir Keir Starmer and say he's not a liar, he's just a skillful lawyer?
No, he's a liar. He stood before the farmers and he made it quite clear to them that he was not going to do what he has done with the inheritance.
He said to the farmers before the election, we're on your side.
That's right. I mean, you know, and there was no mention of him taking away our winter fuel allowance. And of course, as for the I forgot her name now, that woman in accounts.
Rachel Reeves.
That's right, I forgot.
Head of complaints, yeah.
Head of complaints. I mean, she is beyond. She's beyond a joke. She really is. I am ashamed of my country. I'm ashamed that we have been made a laughing stock. And I think this man is absolutely appalling. He may be kind to his cat, but if you're a human being and you get in his way, watch out, Mark, he'll walk all over you.
Well, I don't know how you can preside over so much damage to the country. I believe we're going to hear from the Prime Minister. Carol, hold fire because we're going live to the House of Commons now. Lindsay Hoyle is speaking. He is, of course, the Speaker of the House of Commons. and we're expecting a statement from the Prime Minister any second now. This is live on Talk, and the Prime Minister needs to explain to the House of Commons and to the country how much he knew about Mandelson's failure to clear security vetting. Now, this appears to be a lengthy statement, first of all, from the Speaker of the House. Don't forget, this is Lindsay Hoyle, who had a spectacular row with the Prime Minister at PMQs on Wednesday because Hoyle was concerned the PM wasn't answering questions. Clues in the name, it's Prime Minister's questions. Well, there was a furious dust-up. Starmer raised his voice against the Speaker and bashed his fist against one of the green benches. So clearly the Prime Minister is feeling the heat. We're expecting Ollie Robbins shortly, but first the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I'd like to provide the House with information that I now have about the appointment of Peter Mandelson as our ambassador to the United States. But, Mr. Speaker, before I go into the details, I want to be very clear with this House that while this statement will focus on the process surrounding Peter Mandelson's vetting and appointment, at the heart of this, there is also a judgment I made that was wrong. I should not have appointed Peter Mandelson. I take responsibility for that decision, and I apologise again to the victims of the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein, who were clearly failed by my decision. Mr. Speaker, last Tuesday evening, the 14th of April, I found out for the first time that on the 29th of January 2025, before Peter Mandelson took up his position as ambassador, the Foreign Office officials granted him developed vetting clearance against the specific recommendation of the United Kingdom security vetting that developed vetting clearance should be denied. Not only that, the Foreign Office officials who made that decision did not pass this information to me, to the Foreign Secretary, to her predecessor, the Deputy Prime Minister, to any other minister, or even to the former Cabinet Secretary, Sir Chris Wormold. I found this staggering, and therefore last Tuesday I immediately instructed officials in Downing Street and the Cabinet Office to urgently establish the facts on my authority. I wanted to know who made the decision, on what basis, who knew, and Mr. Speaker, I wanted that information for the precise and explicit purpose of updating this House, because this is information I should have had a long time ago, and it is information that this House should have had a long time ago. It is information that I and the House had the right to know. I will now set out a full timeline of the events in the Peter Mandelson process, including from the fact-finding exercise I instructed last Tuesday. Before doing so, I want to remind and reassure the House that the Government will comply fully with the humble address motion of the 4th of February. Mr. Speaker, in December 2024, I was in the process of appointing a new ambassador for Washington. A due diligence exercise was conducted by the Cabinet Office into Peter Mandelson's suitability, including questions put to him by my staff in Number 10. Peter Mandelson answered those questions on the 10th of December, and I received final advice on the due diligence process on the 11th. I made the decision to appoint him on the 18th of December. The appointment was announced on the 20th, and the security vetting process began on the 23rd of December 2024. Mr. Speaker, I want to make clear to the House that for a direct ministerial appointment, it was usual for security vetting to happen after the appointment, but before starting in post. That was the process in place at the time. Mr. Speaker, this was confirmed by the former Cabinet Secretary Sir Chris Wormold at the Foreign Affairs Select Committee on the 3rd of November 2025 when he gave evidence. Sir Chris made clear, and I'm quoting him now, when we are making appointments from outside the civil service, the normal thing is for security clearance to happen after appointment, but before the person signs a contract and takes up post. At the same hearing of the same Select Committee, the former Permanent Secretary to the Foreign Office, Sir Ollie Robbins, said, and I quote again, "Peter Mandelson did not hold national security vetting when he was appointed, but," he went on, "as is normally the case with external appointments to my department and the wider civil service, the appointment was made subject to obtaining security clearance." Mr. Speaker, after I sacked Peter Mandelson, I changed that process so that now an appointment cannot be announced until after security vetting is passed. Mr. Speaker, the security vetting was carried out by UK Security Vetting, UKSV, between the 23rd of December 2024 and the 28th of January 2025. UKSV conducted vetting in the normal way, collecting relevant information, as well as interviewing the applicant, in this case, on 2 occasions. Then on the 28th of January 2025, UKSV recommended to the Foreign Office that developed vetting clearance should be denied to Peter Mandelson. The following day, on the 29th of January 2025, notwithstanding the UKSV recommendation that developed vetting clearance should be denied, Foreign Office officials made the decision to grant developed vetting clearance for Peter Mandelson. To be clear, for many departments, a decision from UKSV is binding, but for the Foreign Office, the final decision on developed vetting clearance is made by Foreign Office officials, not UKSV. However, once the decision in this case came to light, the Foreign Office's power to make the final decision on developed vetting clearance was immediately suspended by my Chief Secretary last week. Mr. Speaker, I accept that the sensitive personal information provided by an individual being vetted must be protected from disclosure. If that were not the case, the integrity of the whole process would be compromised. What I do not accept is that the appointing minister cannot be told of the recommendation by UKSV. Indeed, given the seriousness of these issues and the significance of the appointment, I simply do not accept that Foreign Office officials could not have informed me of UKSV's recommendations whilst also maintaining the necessary confidentiality that vetting requires. There is no law that stops civil servants sensibly flagging UKSV recommendations while protecting detailed sensitive vetting information to allow ministers to make judgments on appointments or on explaining matters to Parliament. So let me be very clear. The recommendation in the Peter Mandelson case could and should have been shared with me before he took up his post. Mr. Speaker, let me make a second point. If I had known before he took up his post that UKSV recommendation was that developed vetting clearance should be denied, I would not have gone ahead with the appointment. Mr. Speaker, let me now move to September 2025, because events then and subsequently show with even starker clarity the opportunities missed by Foreign Office officials to make the position clear. Mr. Speaker, on September the 10th, Bloomberg reported fresh details of Mandelson's history with Epstein, and it was then clear to me that Peter Mandelson's answers to my staff in the due diligence exercise were not truthful, and I sacked him. I also changed the direct ministerial appointments process, so full due diligence is now required as standard. Where risks are identified, an interview must be taken pre-appointment to discuss any risks and conflicts of interest, and a summary of this should be provided to the appointing minister. I also made clear that public announcements should not now be made until security vetting has been completed. Mr. Speaker, in light of the revelations in September of last year, I also agreed with the then Cabinet Secretary, Sir Chris Wormold, that he would carry out a review of the appointment process in the Peter Mandelson case, including the vetting. He set out his findings and conclusions in a letter to me on the 16th of September. He advised me in that letter, and again I quote, "The evidence I have reviewed leads me to conclude that appropriate processes were followed in both the appointment and the withdrawal of the former HMA Washington." When he was asked about this, Mr. Speaker, last week, the then Cabinet Secretary was clear that when he carried out his review, the Foreign Office did not tell him about the UK SV recommendation that developed vetting clearance should be denied to Peter Mandelson. I find that astonishing. As I said out Odyssey, I do not accept that I could not have been told about the recommendation before Peter Mandelson took up his post. I absolutely do not accept that the then Cabinet Secretary, an official, not a politician, when carrying out his review, could not have been told that UKSV recommended that Peter Mandelson should be denied developed vetting clearance. It was a vital part of the process that I had asked him to review. Clearly, he could have been told, and he should have been told. Mr. Speaker, on the same day as the then Cabinet Secretary wrote to me, so that's the 16th of September 2025, the Foreign Secretary and the then Permanent Secretary of the Foreign Office, Sir Ollie Robbins, provided a signed statement to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. The statement says, and again I quote, "The vetting process was undertaken by UK Security Vetting on behalf of FCDO and concluded with DV clearance being granted by the FCDO in advance of Lord Mandelson taking up post in February." It went on to say, and again I quote, "Peter Mandelson's security vetting was conducted to the usual standard set for developed vetting in line with established Cabinet Office policy." Mr. Speaker, let me be very clear to the House. This was in response to questions which included whether concerns were raised, what the Foreign Office's response was, and whether they were dismissed. Mr. Speaker, that the Foreign Secretary was advised on and allowed to sign this statement by Foreign Office officials without being told that UKSV had recommended Peter Mandelson be denied developed vetting clearance is absolutely unforgivable. This is a senior Cabinet member giving evidence to Parliament on the very issue in question. Mr. Speaker, in light of further revelations about Peter Mandelson in February of this year, I was very concerned about the fact that developed vetting clearance had been granted to him. Not knowing that, in fact, UKSV had recommended denial of developed vetting clearance, I instructed my officials to carry out a review of the national security vetting process. As I set out, I do not accept that I could not have been told about UKSV's denial of security vetting before Peter Mandelson took up his post in January 25. I do not accept that the then Cabinet Secretary could not have been told in September 2025 when he carried out his review into the process. I do not accept that the Foreign Secretary could not have been told when making statements to the Select Committee again in 2025. But, Mr. Speaker, on top of that, the fact that I was not told even when I ordered a review of the UKSV process is frankly staggering. And I can tell the House that I've now updated the terms of reference for the review into security vetting to make sure it covers the means by which all decisions are made in relation to national security vetting. I've appointed Sir Adrian Fulford to lead the review. Separately, I've asked the Government Security Group in the Cabinet Office to look at any security concerns raised during Peter Mandelson's tenure. Mr. Speaker, I know many members across the House will find these facts to be incredible. To that, I can only say they are right. It beggars belief that throughout the whole timeline of events, officials in the Foreign Office saw fit to withhold this information from the most senior ministers in our system in government. That is not how the vast majority of people in this country expect politics, government or accountability to work. And I do not think it's how most public servants think it should work either. I work with hundreds of civil servants, thousands even, all of whom act with the utmost integrity, dedication and pride to serve this country, including officials from the Foreign Office who, as we speak, are doing a phenomenal job representing our national interest in a dangerous world, in Ukraine, in the Middle East and all around the world. This is not about them, but yet it is surely beyond doubt that the recommendation from UKSV that Peter Mandelson should be denied development clearance was information that could and should have been shared with me on repeated occasions and therefore should have been available to this House and ultimately to the British people. And I commend this statement to the House.
Timmy Bay, not Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I thank the Prime Minister for advance sight of his statement. His reputation is at stake. Everyone is watching. It is finally time for the truth. Earlier today, Mr. Speaker, Downing Street admitted that the Prime Minister inadvertently misled the House. The Prime Minister has chosen not to repeat that from the dispatch box. I will remind him that under the Ministerial Code, he has a duty to correct the record at the earliest opportunity. The Prime Minister says he only found out on Tuesday that Peter Mandelson failed the security vetting. The earliest opportunity to correct the record was Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday, almost a week ago. This is a breach of the Ministerial Code. Under that code, he is bound to be as open as possible with Parliament and the public in answering questions today. So let me start with what we do know. We know the Prime Minister personally appointed Peter Mandelson to be our ambassador to the United States. We know that Mandelson had a close relationship with a convicted paedophile. We know that he had concerning links with Russia and China, links that had already raised red flags. We know that the Prime Minister announced the appointment before vetting was complete, an extraordinary and unprecedented step for the role of US ambassador. The Prime Minister says that it was usual for this because it was a political appointment. So I will remind him and the rest of the Labour front bench who are heckling that Peter Mandelson was a politician who had been sacked twice from government for lying. That meant he should have gone through the full security process. And we also know, finally, Mr. Speaker, that when Peter Mandelson failed the security vetting, he was allowed to continue in the role with access to top-secret intelligence and security information. This goes beyond propriety and ethics. This is a matter of national security. So let me turn to what we do not know. We still do not know exactly why Peter Mandelson failed that vetting. We do not know what risks our country was exposed to, and we do not know how it is possible that the Prime Minister said repeatedly that this was a failure of vetting, went on television and said things that were blatantly incorrect, and not a single advisor or a single official told him that what he was saying wasn't true. At every turn, with every explanation, the government story has become murkier and more contradictory. It is time for the truth. There are too many questions to ask in the allotted time, Mr. Speaker, so I'm now going to ask the Prime Minister just 6 questions, and I have taken the unprecedented step of providing these questions to the Prime Minister in advance. So he has them in front of him. And I have asked for these questions. I have asked for these questions to be put online for the public. They and I expect him to answer. The Prime Minister appointed a national security risk to our most sensitive diplomatic post. Let's look at how this happened. The Right Honourable Gentleman told me at PMQs in September 2025 that full due process was followed in this appointment. We now know that in November 2024, Lord Case, the then Cabinet Secretary, told him this process required security vetting to be done before the appointment. He did not mention any of what Lord Case said in his statement earlier. So, first question, does the Prime Minister accept that when he said on the floor of the House that full due process was followed, this was not true? Secondly, on the 11th of September last year, journalists asked his Director of Communications if it was true that Mandelson had failed security vetting. These allegations were on the front page of a national newspaper, and yet Number 10 did not deny the story. Why? 3. Will the Prime Minister repeat from the dispatch box his words last week that no one in Number 10 was aware before Tuesday that Mandelson had failed his vetting? The Prime Minister says he's furious that he wasn't told the recommendations of the vetting. Yet on the 16th of September, a Foreign Office Minister told Parliament, and I quote, "The national security vetting process is rightly independent of ministers who are not informed of any findings other than the final outcome." This was the government's stated process. So why is the Prime Minister so furious that it was followed? On the 4th of February 2026, the Prime Minister, fifth question, Mr. Speaker, on the 4th of February 2026, the Prime Minister told me from the dispatch box that the security vetting he had received had revealed Mandelson's relationship with Epstein. How could he say that if he had not seen the security vetting? And finally, Mr. Speaker, Sistema is a Russian defense company closely linked to the Kremlin and Vladimir Putin's war machine. Was the Prime Minister aware before the appointment that Peter Mandelson had remained a director of that company long after Russia's invasion of Crimea? Mr. Speaker, everyone makes mistakes. It is how you face up to those mistakes that shows the character of a leader. Instead of taking responsibility for the decisions he made, the Prime Minister has thrown his staff and his officials under the bus. This is a man who once said, "I will carry the can for the mistakes of any organisation I lead." Instead, he has sacked his Cabinet Secretary. He has sacked his Director of Communications. He has sacked his Chief of Staff. And he has now sacked the Permanent Secretary of the Foreign Office. All of these people fired for a decision he made. The Right Honourable Gentleman's defence is that he, a former Director of Public Prosecutions, is so lacking in curiosity that he chose to ask no questions about the vetting process. He asked no questions about Mandelson's relationship with Epstein. He asked no questions about the security risk Mandelson posed. Apparently, he didn't even speak to Peter Mandelson before his appointment. It doesn't appear that he asked any questions at all. Why? Because he didn't want to know. He had taken the risk. He had chosen his man. Whitehall had to follow. It is the duty of the Prime Minister to ensure he is telling the truth. Or does the Ministerial Code not apply to him? I'm only holding the Prime Minister to the same standard to which he held others. On the 26th of January 2022, the Right Honourable Gentleman said to a previous Prime Minister at this dispatch box, if he misled the House, he must resign. Does he stand by those words, or is there one rule for him and another for everyone else?
Mr. Speaker, let me respond to those points. Firstly, when I found out what had happened on Tuesday evening last, I wanted to have answers to the question who made the decision to recommend to give clearance on developed vetting contrary to the advice, why that was done, and who knew about it, so that I could provide the information to the House, Mr. Speaker. That is the exercise that's been conducted since Tuesday evening and today, so that I could come here today to give the full account to the House, which I've just set out. Mr. Speaker, she asked me about developed vetting security clearance after the appointment. I set out that wasn't me saying that. I read out the evidence of the former Permanent Secretary about that, and the former Cabinet Secretary in relation to that. And I think the quotes that I've given to the House are clear enough in relation to that. She also asks why Peter Mandelson failed. Mr. Speaker, it's important to make a distinction between the information provided to the review and the recommendation. The information in the review must be protected and has been protected, because otherwise the integrity of the entire system would fall away. But the recommendation doesn't need to be protected and should not have been protected. Mr. Speaker, in relation to her questions, in relation to the answer about full due process, that was the information that I had, that I put before the House, and it was confirmed to be by Sir Chris Wormald, because in September I asked him to conduct a review of the process to assure me that the process was correctly carried out. He did that and wrote to me on the 16th of September, giving me that his conclusions. In relation, Mr. Speaker, to reports in the media, Number 10 was repeatedly asked about the facts surrounding Peter Mandelson's clearance and was assured that the proper process was followed in that case. Mr. Speaker, in relation to those in number 10, let me give the answer. Nobody in number 10 was informed about UK SV's recommendation. Mr. Speaker, just to be clear and for the record, the Cabinet Office Permanent Secretary did receive information recently and then sought the necessary and legal advice. Once those checks were completed by the Cabinet Office Permanent Secretary, I was told, that is in the last 2 weeks or so, that was entirely the right procedure, to get the legal advice and then to bring it to my attention at the first opportunity. It was the right procedure that was followed by my officials in the last few weeks. Mr. Speaker, in relation to why I was furious about the process, for the very reason, Mr. Speaker, I strongly believe I should have been given this information at the very outset. I strongly believe there were repeated times when I should have been told. I should have been told on appointment. I should have been told when Peter Mandelson was sacked. The Cabinet Secretary should have been told when he reviewed the process. The Foreign Secretary should have been told before she was asked to sign a statement to the Select Committee. And I should have been told when I ordered